eternal warfare that represents his ultimate vision. In this dark time, with the Emperor's light dimmed by the Great Rift and ancient evils awakening across the galaxy, Khorne's path to ascendancy has never been clearer, and the cost of his victory has never been more terrifying to contemplate. Catachan is not merely a dangerous world, it is the archetypal death world of the Imperium, a planet so inherently hostile to human life that its very existence serves as a testament to mankind's stubborn resilience. Located in the Segmentum Ultima, Catachan orbits a blazing white star that bathes its surface in constant, punishing radiation. The planet's proximity to its sun creates a greenhouse effect beneath its dense jungle canopy, resulting in a hot, humid atmosphere that feels like breathing through a wet cloth for those unaccustomed to its oppressive climate. The jungle world was first discovered during the Dark Age of technology, when humanity's exploratory fleets ventured boldly into the unknown reaches of the galaxy. Initial surveys classified Catachan as a potential agricultural world due to its abundant vegetation, but the first colonists quickly discovered the horrifying truth behind the planet's lush appearance. Those early settlers found themselves trapped when the Age of Strife descended upon the galaxy, cutting them off from Terra and the rest of human civilization. Warp storms made interstellar travel impossible, and the colonists were abandoned to their fate on a world that seemed determined to exterminate them. Catachan's ecosystem evolved in isolation for millions of years, developing predatory mechanisms that boggle the mind of Imperial xenobiologists. The planet's flora is as deadly as its fauna, with numerous plant species capable of hunting, trapping, and consuming unwary prey. The brainleaf, for instance, releases spores that infiltrate a victim's respiratory system and eventually take root in the brain, turning the host into a mindless carrier that spreads more spores before eventually dying. The Venus mantrap, a distant and far more lethal cousin of Terra's ancient Venus flytrap, can grow to the size of a HAB unit and possesses enough strength in its fibrous jaws to crush ceramite armor. Even more insidious are the spiker groves, collections of seemingly harmless trees that detect movement through their root systems and launch barbed seed pods at frightening velocities toward any potential threat. These seed pods contain both toxins and the tree's genetic material, effectively using victims as both nutrition and propagation vectors. Imperial guardsmen stationed on Catachan learned to recognize the subtle signs of a spiker grove, the absence of undergrowth, the distinctive pattern of the bark, but visitors rarely survive their first encounter with these deadly arboreals. The fauna of Catachan has evolved in concert with its lethal plant life, resulting in creatures of nightmarish proportions and capabilities. Most infamous among these is the Catachan devil, a creature that resembles a massive scorpion crossed with a centipede, capable of growing up to 20 meters in length. Its chitinous exoskeleton can deflect Law's fire, while its numerous legs allow it to traverse any terrain with frightening speed. The devil's primary hunting method involves ambushing prey from subterranean burrows, using its massive pincers to seize victims before injecting them with paralytic venom through its barbed tail. Even space marines approach Catachan devil hunting grounds with extreme caution, as these creatures have been known to bring down land raiders with their immense strength. Equally terrifying are the brain leaf colonies, vast networks of seemingly innocuous plants that possess a rudimentary collective intelligence. These colonies can coordinate attacks through chemical signaling, causing areas of jungle to become active hunting grounds where vines move with purpose and flowers release toxins in calculated patterns. Imperial xenobiologists debate whether brain leaf colonies constitute a true hive mind or merely display advanced evolutionary adaptations, but Catachan natives know better than to enter their territories regardless. The skies of Catachan offer no respite from danger. Razorwings, avian predators with metallic-edged feathers capable of slicing through flak armor, hunt in coordinated flocks that can strip a human to bone in seconds. Hanging from the jungle canopy are stranglethong lianas, vine-like organisms that mimic normal creepers until prey passes beneath them, at which point they rapidly descend to constrict and crush their victims. Even the microscopic life of Catachan presents mortal danger. The planet hosts thousands of bacteria and viruses that can cause rapid, gruesome death to off-worlders lacking proper immunization. Rot lung, gore fever, and the dreaded Catachan brain leaf plague represent just a few of the diseases that regularly cull the planet's human population. Imperial Medici personnel have documented over 3,000 distinct pathogens unique to Catachan, with new strains evolving regularly due to the planet's accelerated mutation rate. Water offers no safety either. Catachan's rivers and lakes teem with predators adapted to aquatic hunting. The needlefish can detect blood from kilometers away and swarm in the thousands, each one no larger than a human finger, but equipped with diamond-hard teeth that can penetrate carapace armor at weak points. The great barking toad, despite its innocuous name, is perhaps the most feared creature on the planet. When threatened, it can explosively release a cloud of toxins lethal enough to kill every living thing within a 1-kilometer radius, a defense mechanism so excessive that it ensures the toad's own death in the process. It is within this environment of constant, merciless threat that humanity has somehow managed to survive on Catachan since the Age of Strife. The colonists who found themselves stranded during that tumultuous era faced near certain extinction. Historical records indicate that over 90% of the original colony perished within the first year of isolation. Those who survived did so through a combination of adaptability, determination, and the rapid onset of natural selection. The humans of Catachan have evolved distinct physiological adaptations over thousands of years of surviving on their death world. The average Catachan stands taller and more muscular than typical imperial citizens, with males often reaching heights of over 2 meters and possessing naturally hypertrophied musculature. This is not merely a result of constant physical exertion, but a genetic adaptation that allows them to contend with the planet's high gravity and the need for burst strength when facing predators. Catachan's human inhabitants possess enhanced immune systems capable of resisting most of the planet's indigenous diseases and toxins. Their blood contains natural antivenoms and antibacterial compounds that would require extensive medical augmentation in other humans. Their sensory acuity is remarkably heightened, particularly their peripheral vision and ability to detect minute movements, a necessary adaptation for spotting camouflaged predators in the dense jungle. Perhaps most notable is the Catachan respiratory system, which has evolved specialized alveolar structures that can filter out most airborne toxins and spores. Their lung capacity exceeds imperial baseline human standards by approximately 30%, allowing them to engage in prolonged physical exertion in the planet's humid, oxygen-rich but toxin-laden atmosphere. These adaptations come at a price. The mortality rate among Catachan children is approximately 50% before the age of 10. This stark statistic represents an improvement from earlier centuries, where survival rates were even more dismal. Children on Catachan are not sheltered from the planet's dangers. Instead, they are taught from the moment they can walk how to identify threats, how to move silently through the undergrowth, and how to kill efficiently. By the time a Catachan child reaches adolescence, they have typically accumulated more survival knowledge and combat experience than most Imperial Guard veterans from other worlds. The selective pressure of Catachan's environment has also influenced the psychological makeup of its inhabitants. Catachans display a remarkable tolerance for stress and trauma, with neurological scans showing atypical amygdala response patterns that allow them to remain calm and focused in situations that would trigger panic in other humans. This is not to suggest they lack fear. Rather, they have evolved to process and channel fear more efficiently than their off-world counterparts. Despite the extreme dangers of Catachan, the Imperium maintains its presence on the Death World for several strategic reasons. The planet's unique ecosystem produces biological compounds found nowhere else in the galaxy. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintains heavily fortified research stations dedicated to harvesting and studying these substances, many of which have valuable medicinal properties. The blood lotus, for example, produces a sap that can accelerate tissue regeneration to remarkable degrees when properly processed. The Imperium harvests this substance for use in high-grade medici treatments reserved for valuable personnel such as officers and commissars. Similarly, the brain orchid's nectar, when carefully distilled, creates a powerful psychic suppressant used in the containment of psychers and in the manufacture of anti-warp weaponry. Equally valuable are Catachan's toxins. The venom of the Catachan viper is prized by assassins throughout the Imperium for its ability to mimic natural organ failure, while the secretions of the death moss can be refined into weapons-grade biological agents used against particularly troublesome xeno-species. The Adeptus Munitorum maintains a classified facility on Catachan dedicated solely to the weaponization of the planet's natural poisons. Beyond its biological resources, Catachan provides the Imperium with its greatest asset, the Catachan jungle fighters. The harsh natural selection of the Death World produces soldiers of unparalleled skill in guerrilla warfare, survival, and close-quarters combat. A single Catachan regiment can turn the tide of an entire campaign in dense terrain, and the Adeptus Munitorum considers the planet's tithe of soldiers to be worth the considerable expense of maintaining Imperial presence there. The settlements of Catachan exist in a constant state of vigilance and readiness. Unlike the sprawling hive cities or feudal castles found on other Imperial worlds, Catachan's human habitations are practical, defensible, and mobile when necessary. Most communities are built on elevated platforms among the sturdiest trees, connected by retractable bridges that can be quickly withdrawn when predators approach. Walls are reinforced with the chitinous plates harvested from Catachan devils and other large creatures, providing protection against both animal attacks and the corrosive plant secretions that periodically rain from the canopy. Water purification represents one of the greatest technological challenges for Catachan settlements. Nearly all surface water contains microscopic parasites capable of causing horrific infections. Each community maintains elaborate filtration systems, often incorporating living filter organisms specifically bred to neutralize waterborne threats. These systems require constant maintenance and monitoring, as the parasites rapidly evolve to overcome filtration methods. Food production on Catachan bears little resemblance to agriculture as practiced elsewhere in the Imperium. Traditional farming is impossible due to soil toxicity and the predatory nature of most native plants. Instead, Catachans practice a form of controlled harvesting, identifying the few edible species and cultivating them in heavily fortified enclosures. They supplement this with protein from hunting, though even the meat of Catachan fauna must be carefully prepared to neutralize the various toxins that accumulate in the food chain. The transition from child to adult on Catachan occurs not through ceremony or predetermined age, but through demonstrated capability to survive. By the time a Catachan reaches adolescence, they have already faced and overcome challenges that would break hardened veterans from more civilized worlds. This harsh reality forms the foundation of Catachan culture, where the axiom, "only the strong survive," is not philosophical posturing, but literal truth. Catachan society operates on a meritocracy of survival skills. Leadership positions are earned by those who demonstrate exceptional ability to navigate the Death World's dangers while ensuring the survival of others. Unlike the rigid hierarchies found throughout much of the Imperium, authority on Catachan is fluid and practical. A settlement's leader might be displaced not through political maneuvering, but because another individual demonstrates superior judgment during a crisis. This pragmatic approach to leadership extends to their military structure, where battlefield promotions based on demonstrated competence are commonplace. The concept of strength among Catachans differs substantially from imperial standard. Physical prowess is valued, certainly, but equally important is mental resilience, situational awareness, and tactical thinking. A Catachan who can identify 30 different toxic spores by scent alone, or who can distinguish the subtle ground vibrations of an approaching devil from those of a shambling maw, possesses strength just as vital as the ability to wrestle a predator. This holistic understanding of strength shapes their military doctrine, producing soldiers who are not merely physically imposing, but comprehensively lethal. Catachan's unique culture has produced a military force that specializes in asymmetric warfare, ambush tactics, and survival behind enemy lines. Catachan fighters excel at turning hostile environments against their foes, whether that environment is a literal jungle or the confines of an urban war zone. They approach combat with a pragmatism born from generations of survival against overwhelming odds, eschewing glory in favor of efficiency. A clean kill from concealment is preferred to a heroic charge, and conserving resources takes precedence over dramatic last stands. Training for war begins practically from birth on Catachan. Children as young as 4 years old learn to identify dangerous flora and fauna, with parents using games and rhymes to embed critical survival knowledge. Red Spore makes you snore. Forevermore serves as both nursery rhyme and vital warning about the lethal somnolent spores that periodically drift through the jungle. By 6, most children can construct basic traps and snares. By 8, they typically make their first kill of a dangerous predator, usually as part of a group hunt supervised by adults. This informal but intensive education continues throughout adolescence. Teenagers participate in increasingly challenging survival runs where they must navigate from one settlement to another, often covering dozens of kilometers of dense jungle. These journeys serve multiple purposes. They test individual capabilities, forge bonds between future fighters, establish supply routes, and maintain communication between isolated communities. The mortality rate for first-time runners approaches 20%, a figure considered acceptable given the alternatives. By the time a Catachan reaches recruitment age for the Astra Militarum, they have accumulated survival skills that most Imperial training facilities could never hope to instill. The typical Catachan has personally killed dozens of lethal predators, survived countless environmental hazards, and developed an instinctive understanding of guerrilla tactics simply to reach adulthood. This background creates soldiers who require minimal formal training in field craft, stealth, and close-quarters combat. The physical appearance of Catachan natives reflects their harsh environment. The average Catachan male stands approximately 2.1 meters tall, with females averaging 1.9 meters. Their musculature develops naturally to a degree that would require extensive augmetics or chemical enhancement in other humans. This is not merely aesthetic. The dense jungle terrain demands constant climbing, cutting, and fighting, activities that build functional strength rather than showy bulk. Their skin typically exhibits a deep tan from constant exposure to Catachan's intense sunlight, though this base tone varies according to the planet's limited genetic diversity. More distinctive are the networks of scars that mark virtually every adult Catachan. These are not primarily decorative, though some hold cultural significance. Rather, they tell the story of countless encounters with the planet's dangers, acid burns from plant secretions, claw marks from predators, and the puckered remnants of parasitic infections. Catachan eyes often appear slightly larger than Imperial baseline, with expanded peripheral vision and exceptional adaptation to low light conditions. Their pupils can dilate to an unusual degree, allowing them to navigate in the deep shadows beneath the jungle canopy. This adaptation comes with heightened sensitivity to bright light, a trade-off that occasionally creates difficulties when Catachans deploy to desert or ice worlds. Their hearing demonstrates similar environmental adaptation, with an ability to filter ambient sounds and focus on specific audio cues that might indicate approaching danger. This selective hearing proves invaluable in combat situations, allowing Catachan fighters to maintain awareness of their surroundings even amid the chaos of battle. Many can detect the distinctive sound of an armed grenade pin being pulled from distances that would render it inaudible to other humans. Perhaps most remarkable is their enhanced sense of smell. Catachans can detect subtle chemical signatures that indicate nearby predators, poisonous plants, or even changes in weather patterns. This olfactory acuity translates directly to battlefield advantages, enabling them to smell promethium lakes, cordite residue, and even the distinctive odor of certain xenospecies from considerable distances. Commissars assigned to Catachan regiments often report being unnerved by fighters who can smell an ambush before any visual confirmation. The recruitment process for Catachan regiments bears little resemblance to the formal procedures employed by other Astra Militarum formations. There are no vast tithe assemblies, no regional draft quotas, no propaganda-filled recruitment centers. Instead, service in the Catachan regiments represents one of the few opportunities for natives to leave their death world and see the wider Imperium while applying their survival skills in new contexts. When a Catachan regiment requires reinforcement, word spreads through the scattered settlements. Volunteers present themselves at designated gathering points, typically bringing their own weapons and equipment. The selection criteria focus not on standardized tests, but on demonstrated survival capability and the recommendations of veteran fighters. A potential recruit vouched for by 3 veterans is virtually guaranteed acceptance, regardless of other factors. This informal recruitment approach extends to the training regimen. Unlike the drill-heavy preparation of other Astra Militarum regiments, Catachan training emphasizes adaptability and independent action. New recruits undergo a condensed introduction to Imperial military protocols, weapons systems not found on their homeworld, and the specific tactical doctrines of their assigned regiment. The focus remains on translating their existing survival skills to military applications rather than rebuilding them as soldiers from the ground up. The Adeptus Munitorum has repeatedly attempted to standardize Catachan recruitment and training, efforts that consistently fail due to both practical and cultural obstacles. The Death World's environmental hazards make centralized training facilities impractical, while the independent nature of Catachan society resists external administrative control. After numerous failed attempts to implement imperial standard procedures, the Adeptus Munitorum has reluctantly accepted the irregular recruitment methods as a necessary accommodation to secure the valuable fighting force. This accommodation extends to equipment and appearance. While officially required to wear standard Astra Militarum uniforms, Catachan fighters modify their gear extensively. The standard issue flak armor is often stripped down or discarded entirely in favor of greater mobility. The iconic sleeveless uniform that exposes their muscular arms is not mere vanity, but a practical adaptation to humid combat environments where full coverage creates dangerous heat retention. Their weapons reflect similar pragmatism. Though proficient with standard issue lasguns, most Catachans supplement their arsenals with an array of blades, from the famous Catachan Fang combat knife to larger implements like the Devil's Claw machete. These weapons serve dual purposes as tools for navigating dense terrain and as silent killers that won't alert nearby enemies. Many Catachan veterans can throw these bladed weapons with accuracy that rivals skilled marksmen using firearms. The distinctive red bandanas worn by many Catachan fighters serve both practical and symbolic functions. Practically, they absorb sweat that would otherwise drip into the eyes during combat in humid environments. Symbolically, they represent the blood shed by generations of Catachans in service to the Imperium. Some bandanas are passed down through families, carrying the sweat and occasionally bloodstains of ancestors who fought across countless worlds. This emphasis on heritage and lineage represents one of the few sentimental aspects of Catachan culture. Fighters take immense pride in family traditions of military service, with some bloodlines boasting unbroken chains of Astra Militarum service stretching back thousands of years. Names carry significant weight, with certain families known for producing exceptional snipers, demolitions experts, or officers. The non-standard practices extend to unit organization. While Catachan regiments technically conform to Astra Militarum organizational structures on official documentation, their actual battlefield deployment often bears little resemblance to these paper formations. Squad compositions shift fluidly based on mission requirements, with fighters regrouping according to immediate needs rather than fixed unit designations. This flexibility creates administrative headaches for the Adeptus Munitorum, but delivers tactical advantages that justify the irregularity. Catachan units can rapidly reconfigure to address emerging threats, splitting into smaller teams or consolidating into larger forces without the communication delays typical of more rigidly organized regiments. This adaptability proves particularly valuable in dense terrain where command and control networks face significant challenges. The relationship between Catachan regiments and the commissariat deserves particular mention. The survival-focused pragmatism of Catachan fighters frequently clashes with the ideological rigidity of Imperial commissars. Newly assigned commissars who attempt to enforce strict adherence to Imperial doctrine often meet with unfortunate accidents in the heat of battle. The phenomenon of commissars suffering unusually high casualty rates when assigned to Catachan regiments has become so notorious that some within the officio praefectus refer to such assignments as suicide postings. Those commissars who survive long enough to earn Catachan respect typically do so by demonstrating practical value rather than merely enforcing discipline. A commissar who can contribute meaningfully to survival in hostile environments, who adapts to Catachan methods rather than fighting them, may eventually find themselves treated as honorary members of the regiment. This represents perhaps the highest compliment Catachans can offer to an outsider. The Catachan jungle fighters operate with a regimental structure that exists in constant tension with Imperial military standards. While their organization appears conventional on Adeptus Munitorum documentation, the practical reality of Catachan operations reveals a far more adaptable and fluid command network shaped by the Death World experience. The Astra Militarum maintains numerous Catachan regiments, each with its own storied history and battlefield specialization. Among the most renowned is the Catachan 2nd Regiment, known throughout the Imperium as the Green Vipers. This regiment earned its fearsome reputation during the Macharian Crusade, where they spearheaded assaults into the densest jungle worlds encountered by Lord Solar Macharius's forces. The Green Vipers specialize in deep reconnaissance and target elimination, often operating weeks ahead of main Imperial forces to neutralize enemy command structures before the primary assault begins. Equally celebrated is the Catachan 18th Regiment, the Swamprats, who have developed unparalleled expertise in wetland and marsh warfare. The Swamprats gained prominence during the Badab War, where they outmaneuvered secessionist forces in the treacherous swamplands of Signax. Their soldiers trained specifically for aquatic infiltration, developing techniques for underwater breathing using naturally hollow reeds and methods for moving through chest-deep water without creating detectable ripples. The regiment maintains a collection of specially modified equipment, including waterproof Laz weapons and flotation gear constructed from the buoyant bladders of Catachan amphibious predators. Other notable regiments include the Catachan 5th, Black Vipers, specialists in night operations and stealth assassinations, the Catachan 14th, Unwashed Scum, experts in chemical and biological warfare environments, and the Catachan 23rd, Ghost Walkers, masters of urban infiltration who apply jungle hunting techniques to hive city environments. While these regiments maintain distinct identities and specializations, they share a common approach to command structure that differs significantly from Imperial standard. The conventional Astra Militarum chain of command, with clear delineation between officers and enlisted ranks, exists more as a formality than practical reality in Catachan regiments. Leadership positions are fluid, with battlefield authority often determined by demonstrated competence rather than formal rank. This unconventional approach is exemplified by Colonel Iron Hand Strachan of the Catachan 2nd. Strachan earned his nickname after losing his right arm to a Merle landshark and having it replaced with a bionic limb. What distinguishes Strachan's leadership style is his continued participation in frontline operations despite his senior rank. Unlike officers from more traditional regiments who direct from command posts, Strachan leads reconnaissance missions personally, maintaining the respect of his troops through demonstrated skill rather than rank privilege. The colonel's approach typifies the Catachan leadership philosophy. Authority flows from capability rather than insignia. This creates a command structure where even high-ranking officers defer to lower-ranked specialists when the situation demands their expertise. During the Tyrannid incursion on Coralcal 8, Colonel Strachan famously placed himself under the tactical direction of Sergeant Brindlehurst, whose extensive experience fighting Tyrannids during the Muckrag campaign provided critical insights that Strachan himself lacked. This flexible command arrangement extends throughout Catachan regiments. Sergeant Stonetooth Harker of the Catachan 2nd exemplifies the outsized influence non-commissioned officers wield in these formations. Harker earned his nickname from allegedly using his teeth to crush the skull of an orc after being disarmed during close combat. Despite his technical rank as sergeant, Harker's battlefield authority often exceeds that of commissioned officers when operating in dense terrain. His heavy weapons squad operates with remarkable independence, often detaching from main forces to establish fire support positions without requiring explicit orders. The Catachan approach to battlefield communication reinforces this fluid command structure. Rather than relying on formal Vox protocols and authentication codes, Catachan units employ a complex system of jungle signals adapted to military use. These include bird call imitations, specific patterns of vegetation disturbance, and subtle environmental manipulations that remain indecipherable to outsiders but convey detailed information to trained Catachans. During the Dulmalin campaign, a single Catachan scout successfully coordinated the movements of 3 separate platoons, using only such environmental signals after enemy jamming disabled conventional Vox networks. Within this unconventional structure, specialized formations have emerged that further distinguish Catachan operations from standard Imperial tactics. Most notable are the Devil Squads, elite kill teams typically comprising 5 to 8 veteran fighters selected for exceptional stealth and close combat prowess. These squads operate deep behind enemy lines, often infiltrating weeks before main Imperial forces to eliminate high-value targets and disrupt enemy logistics. Devil Squad selection involves a grueling assessment process that tests not just combat skills, but psychological resilience and independent judgment. Candidates must complete a ghost run, a solo navigation of hostile territory, while evading hunter-killer teams composed of existing Devil Squad members. Success rates for first-time candidates hover around 15%, with most requiring multiple attempts before selection. Once formed, Devil Squads typically remain together for years, developing the instinctive coordination that allows them to operate in complete silence. The equipment loadout of Devil Squads reflects their specialized role. Standard issue weapons are extensively modified for silent operation, with custom-built sound suppressors for Law's weapons and specially formulated low flash power packs. Each squad typically includes at least one member skilled with a long Laws for overwatch and initial target elimination. Close combat specialists carry an array of bladed weapons, including the feared Catachan Fang, a knife of such size and heft that soldiers from other regiments often mistake it for a sword. Complementing the Devil Squads are the veteran jungle fighter formations. While Devil Squads specialize in assassination and sabotage, veteran jungle fighters excel at area denial and ambush warfare. These units typically comprise soldiers with at least 5 years of off-world combat experience who have demonstrated exceptional skill in manipulating terrain to tactical advantage. Veteran jungle fighters receive additional training in demolitions and trap setting, skills they employ to transform neutral terrain into death zones for advancing enemies. During the Quintarn Theater of the Third War for Armageddon, a single 10-man team of veteran jungle fighters successfully channeled an orc advance numbering in the thousands into a series of prepared kill zones, effectively blunting the Xenos' offensive with minimal Imperial casualties. The specialized nature of these formations creates unique logistical challenges. Unlike standard Astra Militarum units with predictable equipment needs, Catachan special formations require diverse, often customized gear that varies according to mission parameters. This necessitates a procurement system that balances Imperial standardization with operational flexibility. The Adeptus Munitorum has established specialized logistics channels for Catachan regiments that operate parallel to standard supply chains. These channels include dedicated procurement officers with authority to requisition non-standard equipment when operational needs justify the deviation. In practice, this creates a 2-tier supply system. Standard Imperial equipment flows through normal channels, while specialized gear moves through what Catachan quartermasters informally call the Jungle Network. This Jungle Network extends beyond official Imperial supply chains to include relationships with rogue traders, civilian contractors, and even carefully vetted black market suppliers in some sectors. While technically outside regulation, these procurement methods are tolerated by higher authorities due to their demonstrated effectiveness in maintaining Catachan combat capability. The Ordo Militum occasionally investigates these irregular supply lines, but typically concludes that the operational benefits outweigh the procedural violations. The Catachan approach to equipment maintenance further distinguishes them from standard Imperial forces. Rather than relying on dedicated technical specialists, Catachan doctrine emphasizes universal maintenance skills, with every fighter expected to perform field repairs on their own equipment. This distributed maintenance model creates remarkable resilience, as damaged equipment can be repaired by any available personnel, rather than requiring specialized technicians who might become casualties. This self-sufficiency extends to ammunition and power supply. Catachan fighters receive training in emergency field recharging of Law's weapon power packs, using improvised methods ranging from direct solar charging to adapting enemy power sources. During the Pelen campaign, a Catachan platoon cut off from supply lines for 73 days maintained combat effectiveness by capturing and converting Tau power cells to work with Imperial weapons. The Adeptus Munitorum has attempted numerous times to bring Catachan logistics into closer alignment with Imperial standards, efforts that consistently produce more documentation than actual change. After each standardization initiative, Catachan regiments superficially adjust their procedures to satisfy inspections while maintaining their proven methods in actual operations. This administrative resistance has become so expected that some Munitorum officials now include compliance adjustment factors in their reports on Catachan units, essentially acknowledging the gap between reported and actual practices. Despite these deviations from Imperial standard, the overall combat effectiveness of Catachan regiments ensures continued tolerance for their organizational peculiarities. The specialized nature of their warfare capabilities represents an irreplaceable asset in certain campaign environments, particularly as the Imperium confronts increasing threats in dense terrain theaters. The Catachan approach to battlefield medicine deserves particular mention, as it differs significantly from standard Imperial protocol. Rather than maintaining dedicated medici personnel who remain behind the front lines, Catachan units distribute medical training throughout their forces, with every squad including at least 2 fighters qualified in emergency field treatment. These fighter medics carry specialized kits containing both standard Imperial medical supplies and traditional Catachan remedies derived from their Death World's flora. These traditional treatments, while viewed with suspicion by the officio medici, demonstrate remarkable effectiveness in certain situations. The sap of the Catachan blackroot, for instance, contains natural coagulants that can seal wounds more effectively than standard issue clotting agents. Similarly, the crushed seeds of the fireberry can be applied to burns to reduce tissue damage and prevent infection. Catachan medics typically combine these traditional remedies with Imperial medical technology, creating hybrid treatment protocols that maximize survival rates in field conditions. The Catachan Fang stands as perhaps the most iconic piece of equipment associated with the jungle fighters, a weapon that transcends its practical applications to become a cultural symbol. Far larger than standard Imperial combat knives, the Fang typically measures between 50 and 70 centimeters in length, with a distinctive forward curved blade reminiscent of ancient Terra's machetes. Each Fang is individually crafted on Catachan itself, often by the fighter who will wield it, using metal salvaged from crashed spacecraft or recycled from damaged equipment. The blade's construction incorporates several distinctive features that reflect its dual nature as both tool and weapon. The spine typically measures nearly a centimeter in thickness, providing the structural strength needed to hack through dense jungle vegetation. The blade widens significantly toward the tip, creating both a forward weight balance that enhances chopping power and a broader surface for batoning through tough materials. Most Fangs feature a partially serrated section near the handle for sawing purposes, while the primary edge maintains a razor sharpness capable of cleanly severing limbs with a single stroke. What truly distinguishes the Catachan Fang from other large combat knives is the hollow handle, which contains a variety of survival implements. A standard configuration includes waterproof matches, fishing line and hooks, a small compass, and emergency medical supplies such as wound closure strips and antiseptic powder. The pommel typically unscrews to reveal these components, while also functioning as a striking surface hard enough to shatter bone. Some veteran fighters modify their fangs with additional features such as integrated wire snares or specialized blade coatings that prevent corrosion in particularly hostile environments. The cultural significance of the fang extends beyond its practical applications. For Catachans, receiving their first fang marks the transition from childhood to adolescence, typically occurring around age 10 when they begin making solo journeys through the jungle. The weapon becomes an extension of the fighter, with many believing that a properly maintained fang absorbs some essence of its wielder through constant use. Veterans can often identify the original owner of a fang simply by examining the wear patterns on the handle and the specific balance of the blade. Catachan fighters develop an intimate relationship with their fangs, performing daily maintenance rituals regardless of battlefield conditions. The specific sharpening technique, 7 strokes on each side of the blade, always moving from hilt to tip, becomes so ingrained that many perform it automatically while planning operations or receiving briefings. This constant maintenance ensures that the weapon remains ready for both expected and unexpected use, a philosophy that extends to all Catachan equipment. While the fang represents the most visible blade in the Catachan arsenal, fighters typically carry multiple edged weapons for specialized purposes. The Devil's Claw, a smaller blade worn on the opposite hip from the fang, features a deeply hooked tip designed specifically for disemboweling attacks. The Night Reaper, a slim dagger often concealed in a boot or arm sheath, serves primarily as a silent killing tool with a needle-like point optimized for penetrating the vulnerable areas of enemy armor. Beyond bladed weapons, Catachan fighters show distinct preferences in their firearms that reflect their tactical doctrines and battlefield environments. The shotgun features prominently in Catachan arsenals, valued for its devastating close-range effectiveness and versatility in ammunition types. The Catachan 18th Regiment, in particular, has developed specialized shotgun techniques for clearing confined spaces, including the Catachan Sweep, a rapid-fire method that systematically eliminates threats in a 180-degree arc without exposing the shooter to counterattack. Standard Catachan shotguns undergo extensive modification from their factory configurations. The barrels are typically shortened to improve maneuverability in dense terrain, while the stocks are reinforced to withstand use as improvised clubs when ammunition runs low. Many veterans add specialized sights calibrated for the reduced range of their modified weapons, along with custom shell holders that allow for quick selection between ammunition types based on target characteristics. The ammunition itself receives similar attention. Catachan armorers produce specialized hand-loaded shells incorporating materials found on various campaign worlds. During the Tyranid incursions on the agricultural world of Harvester's End, Catachan fighters developed acid shells containing harvested Tyranid ichor that proved particularly effective against the chitinous exoskeletons of the Xenos. Similarly, operations against orcs often see the deployment of burner rounds packed with incendiary compounds that ignite the fungal physiology of the greenskins. Flamers represent another weapon category favored by Catachan regiments, particularly for operations in dense vegetation or enclosed spaces. The standard issue Imperial Flamer undergoes significant modification in Catachan hands, with fuel mixtures adjusted to create hotter, more adhesive flames that continue burning after initial contact. The psychological impact of these weapons proves particularly valuable against less disciplined enemies, with even hardened orc mobs breaking formation when confronted with the distinctive whoosh of Catachan flamers. The Catachan 8th Regiment, known as the Burning Devils, specializes in coordinated flamer tactics that transform entire battlefields into infernos. Their signature maneuver involves establishing a perimeter of flamers around enemy positions, then systematically constricting this fire ring while maintaining precise safe zones for friendly forces. During the Dulmalin campaign, a single company of Burning Devils successfully contained a genestealer infestation by creating a controlled burn that consumed 8 square kilometers of urban territory while preserving critical infrastructure. Heavy bolters occupy a special place in Catachan tactical doctrine, serving as mobile fire support platforms that provide suppressive capabilities without sacrificing maneuverability. Unlike other Imperial Guard regiments that typically deploy heavy bolters in fixed positions, Catachan fighters carry these massive weapons in mobile operations, using their exceptional physical strength to manage the considerable weight and recoil. Sergeant Stonetooth Harker exemplifies this approach, famously wielding the heavy bolter Payback as a personal weapon with accuracy that rivals dedicated weapons teams from other regiments. The modifications to Catachan heavy bolters focus primarily on weight reduction and improved cooling systems to allow for sustained fire in humid environments. Standard Imperial cooling jackets are often replaced with custom systems utilizing heat-dispersing fins based on the biological structures of certain Catachan fauna. The ammunition feeds receive similar attention, with specialized belts designed to prevent jamming when exposed to the mud, water, and organic debris common in jungle operations. The standard issue lasgun, while utilized by all Catachan regiments, undergoes perhaps the most extensive modifications of any weapon in their arsenal. The Catachan pattern lasgun represents less a formal pattern and more a collection of field modifications that have become standardized through practical experience. These modifications begin with the removal of all non-essential components to reduce weight and improve reliability in humid conditions. The stock is typically shortened and reinforced, while the barrel receives additional heat-dispersing elements to prevent warping during rapid-fire sequences. Power regulation systems receive particular attention, with custom modifications that allow for variable energy output depending on tactical requirements. At the lowest setting, these modified lasguns produce minimal visible beam and nearly silent operation, ideal for operations where stealth takes priority over immediate stopping power. At maximum output, the weapons deliver significantly more energy per shot than standard configurations, though at the cost of reduced ammunition efficiency and increased heat generation. The sights on Catachan lasguns reflect the environments where they typically operate. Standard Imperial iron sights are replaced with specialized systems that function effectively in low-light conditions, often incorporating luminescent materials harvested from bioluminescent Catachan fungi. Many veterans further customize their weapons with auxiliary aiming systems calibrated for their personal shooting style and preferred engagement ranges. Camouflage forms an integral part of Catachan wargear, with fighters developing specialized patterns for different operational environments. Unlike the standardized camouflage issued to most Imperial Guard regiments, Catachan patterns are applied in the field using local materials to match specific terrain features. This approach creates camouflage that adapts to the actual operational environment rather than generic terrain types. The base layer typically consists of clothing in muted greens and browns, deliberately manufactured with irregular patterns that break up the human silhouette. Upon deployment to a new environment, fighters supplement this base with local vegetation, mud, and other materials applied according to techniques passed down through generations of jungle warfare. During operations on the ash-covered wastes of Mordian 7, Catachan fighters rapidly developed gray-black camouflage patterns using volcanic ash that rendered them nearly invisible in the cinder-strewn landscape. This adaptive approach extends to their equipment. Weapons receive similar camouflage treatment, with bright metal surfaces dulled using specialized compounds that prevent both visual and auspex detection without compromising function. Even optical systems receive anti-reflective coatings derived from Catachan plant resins that eliminate the telltale glint that might reveal a sniper's position. The effectiveness of Catachan camouflage techniques has led to their adoption by other specialized Imperial forces, particularly those operating behind enemy lines. The 88th Elysian Drop Troops Regiment incorporated Catachan camouflage methodologies into their own doctrine after joint operations during the Taros campaign demonstrated their superior effectiveness compared to standard Imperial patterns. Beyond weapons and camouflage, Catachan fighters employ an extensive array of specialized equipment designed for jungle warfare. Motion sensors calibrated to distinguish between natural environmental movements and those caused by sentient beings allow for early warning of approaching enemies. These devices, often constructed from modified Imperial technology combined with techniques developed on Catachan itself, can detect subtle disturbances in foliage patterns that would escape standard auspex systems. Trap making constitutes a specialized skill set in which all Catachan fighters receive training. Beyond simple explosive devices, these traps include elaborate mechanisms designed to incapacitate, disorient, or channel enemy forces into prepared killing zones. The Catachan Welcome represents perhaps the most infamous example, a carefully constructed system of false trails, tripwires, and suspended blades that can transform a seemingly safe path into a gauntlet of death. Improvised explosives feature prominently in Catachan tactical doctrine, with fighters trained to create effective demolition charges from available materials. The standard Catachan demo kit contains minimal actual explosives, instead providing the components needed to weaponize materials found in the field. During the Havensreach campaign, Catachan sappers successfully destroyed an orc ammunition dump using explosives crafted from agricultural fertilizer and industrial chemicals salvaged from abandoned manufacturing facilities. The deployment of these improvised explosives follows distinctive Catachan methodologies that maximize psychological impact alongside physical damage. Rather than concentrating demolition charges for maximum destructive effect, Catachan fighters often distribute smaller charges across wider areas, creating unpredictable patterns of detonation that disorient and demoralize enemy forces. This approach proves particularly effective against opponents like orcs and chaos cultists, whose morale can be broken by the perception of being attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. Environmental hazards themselves become weapons in Catachan hands. Fighters receive extensive training in identifying naturally occurring dangers that can be weaponized against enemies unfamiliar with local conditions. During campaigns in swamp environments, Catachans frequently lure enemy forces into areas containing venomous wildlife or quicksand-like terrain features. On worlds with hostile flora similar to Catachan's own ecosystem, fighters manipulate predatory plants to create natural barriers that funnel enemy movements into prepared ambush positions. The Catachan approach to warfare is fundamentally shaped by their Death World upbringing, where every day presents a struggle for survival against overwhelming odds. This experience translates directly into their combat methodology, which emphasizes stealth, ambush, and the exploitation of terrain to neutralize enemy advantages. Unlike the massed infantry charges favored by regiments like the Death Corps of Krieg or the static defensive formations of the Mordian Iron Guard, Catachan doctrine revolves around never fighting on the enemy's terms. Catachan guerrilla warfare begins with extensive reconnaissance. Before engaging any enemy force, Catachan units deploy scout teams to gather detailed intelligence on enemy positions, patrol patterns, and supply lines. These scouts operate under a doctrine known as ghost movement, a technique that leaves minimal environmental disturbance while allowing rapid traversal of hostile territory. The methodology involves careful foot placement, distributed weight bearing, and meticulous attention to restoring disturbed vegetation after passage. During the Octarius campaign, a two-man Catachan scout team successfully infiltrated an orc encampment housing over 3,000 greenskins, mapped their entire defensive layout, identified the location of their ammunition stores, and exfiltrated without detection. This intelligence enabled a subsequent strike by just 20 Catachan fighters that eliminated the orc leadership and triggered a catastrophic ammunition explosion, effectively neutralizing the entire orc force with minimal Imperial casualties. The information gathered during reconnaissance phases determines the specific ambush tactics employed. Catachan fighters categorize ambushes into several distinct types, each with specialized applications depending on enemy composition and terrain features. The hammer strike represents their most direct approach, a coordinated attack from multiple directions simultaneously, designed to create the impression of a much larger attacking force. This tactic proves particularly effective against enemies with poor unit cohesion, such as orc mobs or chaos cultists, who often break formation when unable to identify the primary attack vector. For more disciplined opponents, Catachans employ the bleeding cut methodology, a series of small, seemingly random attacks designed to gradually degrade enemy combat effectiveness rather than seek immediate victory. This approach targets logistics, communications, and support elements rather than frontline combat units. By eliminating these vulnerable components, Catachan teams systematically isolate enemy combat formations, rendering them ineffective without direct confrontation. During the Veldt campaign against Tau forces, the Catachan 5th Regiment employed the bleeding cut to devastating effect. Rather than engaging the technologically superior Tau fire warriors directly, Catachan teams conducted systematic raids against their drone controllers, communications specialists, and ethereal advisors. Over 3 weeks of operations, they executed 157 separate small unit actions, none involving more than 8 fighters. The cumulative effect reduced Tau combat effectiveness by an estimated 70% without triggering the major engagement the Xenos forces sought. Terrain manipulation represents another cornerstone of Catachan tactical doctrine. Unlike many Imperial forces who view difficult terrain as an obstacle to be overcome, Catachan fighters see it as a weapon to be exploited. They systematically analyze battlefield environments to identify natural features that can be weaponized against enemy forces unfamiliar with their characteristics. On jungle worlds, this might involve identifying toxic plant species that can be disturbed to release spores during enemy advances. In urban environments, it translates to weakening structural elements to create delayed collapse traps or identifying municipal water systems that can be repurposed as improvised flood weapons. The Catachan 23rd Regiment demonstrated this approach during Hive city operations on Persepolis, where they modified water distribution systems to create sudden high-pressure discharges that disoriented heretic forces during critical engagements. By strategically weakening specific pipe junctions, they created a series of timed water breaches that flooded enemy-held lower levels while simultaneously providing cover for their own advance through the resulting chaos. This environmental awareness extends to acoustic manipulation, with Catachan units employing specialized techniques to distort sound patterns in complex terrain. By placing simple devices that amplify, muffle, or redirect ambient noise, they create audio environments that confuse enemy auspex readings and make accurate targeting nearly impossible. During operations against Eldar Rangers on Biel-Tan's southern frontier, Catachan teams deployed resonator devices that created overlapping sound patterns, effectively negating the Eldar's advanced sensory capabilities and allowing successful infiltration of positions previously considered impenetrable. Close quarters combat represents perhaps the most renowned aspect of Catachan tactical doctrine. Their approach to hand-to-hand fighting bears little resemblance to the formalized combat disciplines taught in Schola Progenium facilities across the Imperium. Instead, Catachan close combat techniques emphasize immediate incapacitation through targeting vital areas with maximum force. The methodology focuses on exploiting anatomical vulnerabilities common to most humanoid opponents, with specialized adaptations for Xenos physiology encountered in previous campaigns. The foundation of Catachan hand-to-hand combat lies in what they term total body weaponization, the concept that every part of the fighter's body can deliver lethal force when properly applied. Training begins with identifying the natural weapons present in the human form: knuckles, elbows, knees, heels, and the skull itself. These natural impact points are then supplemented with carried weapons, typically blades, creating an integrated combat system that flows seamlessly between armed and unarmed techniques. What distinguishes Catachan close combat from other Imperial fighting styles is its emphasis on environmental integration. Fighters train specifically to incorporate terrain features into their techniques, using trees, walls, or debris as force multipliers. A common drill involves practitioners demonstrating 20 different lethal applications of whatever random object an instructor might point to in their vicinity. This adaptability proves particularly valuable in zone mortalis operations, where conventional weapons may malfunction or ammunition may be limited. The effectiveness of these techniques was demonstrated during the boarding action against the Space Hulk, Harbinger of Decay. When their weapons suffered systematic failure due to Nurgle-inspired corruption, a squad of Catachan fighters successfully cleared an entire deck using improvised weapons fashioned from damaged corridor fixtures and debris. Autopsy reports later confirmed that each of the 17 plague zombies eliminated had suffered fatal trauma from distinctly different improvised weapons, highlighting the adaptability of Catachan close combat methodology. Forward observation represents another specialized combat role at which Catachan units excel. Their ability to remain undetected in hostile territory makes them ideal for directing artillery fire or airstrikes against enemy positions. Catachan forward observers undergo specialized training in ballistic calculation and fire correction, enabling them to accurately direct munitions without the complex equipment typically required for such operations. During the Damocles Gulf Crusade, Catachan observers operated deep within Tau-controlled territory, providing targeting data for Imperial Navy bombardments that consistently struck within 5 meters of designated aim points, despite atmospheric interference that rendered standard targeting systems ineffective. Their methodology involved simple mechanical range-finding devices combined with environmental indicators like vegetation movement to calculate wind drift, techniques that proved immune to the electronic warfare measures employed by Tau forces. This expertise extends to naval gunfire support, with specialized Catachan teams trained to direct macro cannon fire from orbiting vessels. These teams employ a distinctive technique called walking the ladder, where they intentionally call for initial shots to land at extended range, then methodically adjust fire toward the target. This approach minimizes the risk of premature target warning while maximizing accuracy for the critical strikes. Deep strike operations constitute another area where Catachan expertise provides unique capabilities to Imperial commanders. Unlike the dramatic drop pod assaults favored by Adeptus Astartes forces, Catachan deep strikes emphasize stealth insertion, followed by targeted action against critical objectives. These operations typically begin with small teams infiltrating enemy territory through unconventional means, underwater approaches, subterranean passages, or high-altitude insertion using minimalist grav-chute equipment modified for silent deployment. Once inserted, these teams establish hidden forward operating bases from which they conduct reconnaissance and prepare for the arrival of larger forces. These bases, known colloquially as snake nests, incorporate natural features and are designed to remain undetectable even to sophisticated scanning technology. During operations on Meridian Prime, a Catachan snake nest remained active for 17 months within 3 kilometers of a major Tau installation without detection, providing continuous intelligence on Xeno's activities while preparing insertion routes for the eventual Imperial counter-offensive. The coordination between these forward elements and main force units follows protocols unique to Catachan operations. Rather than relying on conventional communications technology, which might be detected or jammed, they employ environmental signaling methods adapted from Catachan hunting practices. These include manipulation of local flora to create directional indicators, strategic placement of scent markers detectable only to those trained to recognize them, and modification of natural water flows to transmit information through changes in current patterns. Tunnel fighting represents a specialized combat environment where Catachan fighters demonstrate particular proficiency. Their experience navigating the complex root systems and predator burrows of their home world translates directly to operations in confined subterranean environments. Catachan tunnel fighting doctrine emphasizes sensory adaptation, with fighters training to operate effectively in conditions of near-total darkness, by developing their non-visual senses. This training begins with progressive light reduction exercises, where fighters perform increasingly complex tasks as illumination levels decrease. Advanced practitioners can navigate complex tunnel networks, identify targets, and engage enemies effectively using only touch, hearing, and smell. This capability proves particularly valuable against enemies like Tyrannid tunnel networks or Genestealer cult warrens, where conventional illumination would telegraph Imperial movements to waiting defenders. During the Duskhaven Uprising, Catachan tunnel specialists from the 10th Regiment successfully infiltrated a labyrinthine network of mining tunnels controlled by Genestealer hybrids. Operating without any artificial light sources to avoid detection, they navigated over 20 kilometers of branching passages, identified the central brood chamber through air current analysis, and eliminated the Patriarch using only contact-detonated explosives and bladed weapons. The entire operation occurred without a single Vox transmission, with team coordination maintained through subtle vibration codes transmitted through the tunnel floors. The adaptability of Catachan tactical doctrine allows its effective application across diverse environmental conditions far beyond jungle terrain. In urban environments, they translate jungle warfare principles into equally effective methodologies for city fighting. Building interiors become analogous to dense forest canopies, with Catachan fighters moving through ceiling spaces, maintenance ducts, and wall voids rather than using conventional corridors and stairwells. This approach allows them to bypass enemy strong points and strike at vulnerable command and control centers without engaging defensive perimeters. During the Pavanus Uprising, Catachan urban specialists demonstrated this adaptability by infiltrating rebel-held hive structures through waste disposal systems, emerging behind defensive positions to eliminate leadership elements, while conventional Imperial forces fixed the rebels' attention at barricaded main entrances. The operation resulted in the neutralization of 17 key insurrectionist leaders in a single 12-hour period, effectively decapitating the rebellion without the massive civilian casualties typically associated with urban clearance operations. In desert environments, Catachan units adapt their concealment techniques to open terrain by developing specialized, earth-swimming methods that allow them to move beneath loose soil or sand without visible surface disturbance. This technique, originally developed to avoid detection by the vibration-sensitive predators of Catachan's southern dust basins, proves equally effective against conventional Auspex systems that focus on surface movement detection. The Talern Desert Raiders, themselves masters of desert warfare, have incorporated several Catachan techniques into their own doctrine following joint operations during the Taros campaign. The combined methodology proved particularly effective against Tau forces, whose advanced sensor systems could be systematically deceived by the hybrid approach that incorporated elements from both Imperial specialists. Even in void operations, Catachan adaptability yields effective tactical applications. Their experience navigating three-dimensional jungle canopies translates well to zero-gravity environments, where conventional movement paradigms become obstacles to effective operation. Catachan void specialists develop techniques for silent movement along spacecraft exteriors, using minimal thruster bursts and momentum conservation to avoid detection by motion-sensing defense systems. During the boarding action against the renegade cruiser Merciless Judgment, Catachan void specialists bypassed outer hull defenses by traversing the vessel's exterior using only mechanical grapples and momentum control, accessing the command deck through emergency sensor arrays rather than conventional entry points. This approach allowed them to neutralize the bridge crew before defensive systems could be fully activated, preserving the vessel for Imperial recapture with minimal damage to critical systems. The Second War for Armageddon stands as one of the most devastating conflicts in recent Imperial history, with the Catachan jungle fighters playing a crucial, but often overlooked role in stemming the tide of Orc Wagazkal. When the Orc forces made planetfall in the year 940, one of the 41st millennium, Imperial defenders found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer ferocity and numbers of the Greenskin horde. As hive cities fell one after another, the Catachan 18th Regiment, swamp rats, deployed to the ash wastes surrounding Hive Tempestora, where unusual geological formations had created isolated pockets of jungle-like vegetation amid the otherwise barren landscape. The swamp rats immediately recognized the tactical potential of these terrain features, establishing forward operating bases within the dense growth where orc scouts consistently failed to detect their presence. Rather than engaging in the type of defensive warfare being fought around the Hive perimeters, Colonel Gator Butcher divided his regiment into strike teams of squad strength, each assigned to specific orc supply lines traversing the ash wastes. The effectiveness of these operations became apparent within days. Orc supply convoys began disappearing without trace, their burned-out vehicles discovered days later stripped of all useful materials. The Catachans applied their jungle warfare doctrine to the ash wastes with remarkable success, using the limited vegetation for concealment while striking from multiple directions simultaneously to create the impression of a much larger force. Particularly notable was the action at Sulphur River Delta, where a 20-man Catachan team ambushed an orc mechanized column numbering over 300. The Catachans had spent 3 days preparing the battleground, burying demolition charges at strategic points, and establishing firing positions in elevated rock formations. When the orc convoy entered the prepared kill zone, the Catachans detonated their explosives in a precisely timed sequence designed to disable the lead and rear vehicles first, trapping the remainder in the winding valley. As the disoriented orcs attempted to identify their attackers, the Catachans opened fire from multiple concealed positions, targeting fuel tanks, ammunition stores, and orc vehicle commanders. Within minutes, the convoy had descended into chaos, with greenskins firing wildly at imagined enemy positions, while the actual Catachan fighters relocated between each shot to maintain the illusion of a much larger attacking force. The most decisive moment came when Sergeant Harmon Drake infiltrated the orc command vehicle, a converted Imperial Chimera, and eliminated the mech bug coordinating the convoy's defense. Drake extracted the crude but effective orc communication device and used it to broadcast conflicting orders in a reasonable approximation of orcish speech, directing different sections of the convoy to fire upon each other. The resulting friendly fire incidents completed the convoy's disintegration as a fighting force. By the time the Catachans withdrew, over 200 orc vehicles had been destroyed, with the remainder scattered and leaderless. More importantly, the munitions being transported to the orc siege lines around Hive Tempestora never arrived, creating a critical shortage that forced the greenskins to delay their planned assault for nearly a week, valuable time that allowed Imperial defenders to reinforce their positions. This pattern of operations continued throughout the Second War for Armageddon, with Catachan regiments consistently assigned to interdiction missions targeting orc logistics. Their effectiveness in this role led Commissar Yarrick himself to request additional Catachan formations be deployed specifically to disrupt orc supply operations, recognizing that conventional forces lacked both the specialized training and psychological makeup necessary for such missions. The Catachan 5th Regiment, Black Vipers, demonstrated this specialized capability during the defense of Firebase Hellhound. When orc forces numbering in the thousands surrounded the outpost, conventional wisdom suggested the position would fall within hours. Instead of withdrawing, however, Colonel Snake Stransky led his regiment in what became known as Operation Venom, a systematic campaign of night raids against orc encampments surrounding the firebase. Each night, Catachan teams slipped through orc lines to eliminate key targets, fuel dumps, ammunition stores, and most importantly, the orc leadership. The Black Vipers specifically targeted knobs and mechboys, creating a leadership vacuum that prevented coordinated assaults on the firebase. Particularly effective was their use of captured orc weapons against the greenskins themselves, creating the impression of internal conflict within the orc forces. By the third week of this campaign, the orc forces had become so disorganized and paranoid that they began establishing defensive positions facing inward toward their own encampments rather than toward the Imperial firebase they had originally intended to assault. When Gozkul's lieutenants demanded an explanation for the delay in taking the firebase, the local orc commander reportedly executed his own subordinates in frustration, further degrading the Greenskins' command structure. The Macharian Crusade represented another conflict where Catachan expertise proved invaluable to Imperial success. When Lord Solar Macharius launched his massive campaign of conquest in the year 392 of the 41st millennium, he specifically requested Catachan regiments for operations on Death Worlds and jungle planets where conventional forces would struggle to maintain combat effectiveness. The Catachan 9th Regiment, Iron Cobras, spearheaded the assault on Dwinbar, a planet covered in dense rainforest harboring both hostile native life forms and entrenched separatist forces. Rather than the conventional drop site landing employed by other Imperial forces, the Iron Cobras inserted small teams via high-altitude grav-chute deployment directly into the forest canopy, bypassing the separatist detection systems focused on clearing and flatlands. Once established within the jungle, these teams began a systematic campaign of reconnaissance and sabotage that mapped the entire separatist defense network before the main Imperial force made planetfall. When Lord Macharius launched the formal assault 3 weeks later, he did so with complete knowledge of enemy positions, strength, and supply caches. More importantly, the Catachans had already eliminated key command and control nodes, leaving the separatist forces fragmented and unable to coordinate their defense. The most significant contribution came during the battle for Dwinbar's capital city, Nova Terra. The separatists had transformed the urban center into a fortress, with interlocking fields of fire covering all conventional approaches. Rather than assault these defenses directly, Colonel Drake Marrow led 3 companies of the Iron Cobras through the city's waste management system, a labyrinthine network of tunnels and processing chambers that the defenders had considered impassable due to the presence of indigenous predators similar to Catachan devil spawn. The Catachans navigated this hazardous environment using techniques developed on their homeworld, identifying and avoiding predator territories while maintaining their advance toward the city's central command bunker. Upon reaching their objective, they emerged simultaneously at multiple points surrounding the command center, overwhelming the defenders before they could organize an effective response. With the separatist leadership eliminated and their communication network compromised, Lord Macharius launched his main assault on the city. What had been projected as a 3-month siege with heavy casualties was resolved in under a week, with Imperial forces suffering less than 15% of the originally estimated losses. This pattern would repeat itself throughout the Crusade, with Catachan regiments consistently delivering strategic advantages through unconventional approaches that conventional tacticians had dismissed as impossible. The threat posed by Tyranid splinter fleets has provided perhaps the most challenging battlefield environment for Catachan forces, testing their adaptability against an enemy that shares many characteristics with the predators of their homeworld. On Cytheria, an agricultural world threatened by a splinter of Hive Fleet Kraken, the Catachan 17th Regiment, Screaming Devils, found themselves facing an enemy that adapted to conventional tactics with frightening speed. Colonel Jardkine recognized that standard anti-Tyranid protocols would prove ineffective against an enemy capable of rapid evolutionary response. Instead, he implemented what became known as shifting pattern engagement, a system where Catachan units would employ a specific tactical approach for no more than 3 engagements before completely changing their methodology. This prevented the Tyranid Norn Queens from developing effective countermeasures through their accelerated adaptation cycle. The most successful application of this doctrine occurred in the defense of Harvestthome, Cytheria's primary agricultural processing center. Rather than establishing static defenses around the facility, the Screaming Devils created a series of false defensive positions designed to channel Tyranid organisms into prepared ambush zones. Each ambush employed different weapons and tactics. One might rely on flamers and promethium traps, while the next would utilize sonic weapons and gravitational distortion devices borrowed from Adeptus Mechanicus contingents. This constant tactical variation prevented the Tyranid swarm from developing resistance to any particular approach. More importantly, It created confusion within the synaptic network, as conflicting adaptation imperatives overwhelmed the Norn Queen's ability to process battlefield data. Magos biologists observers noted unprecedented patterns of self-destructive behavior among tyrannid organisms, with creatures developing contradictory evolutionary adaptations that rendered them less effective rather than more so. On Herodian 4, the Catachan 19th Regiment, Mad Dogs, faced a different challenge when a tyrannid splinter fleet targeted the planet's extensive promethium refining infrastructure. The Xeno strategy focused on destroying key refinery nodes to trigger catastrophic chain reactions that would render the entire planet uninhabitable. Conventional defense proved impossible, as the refineries themselves were too volatile to withstand standard combat operations. Colonel Taurus Helsing developed a counter-strategy that leveraged the Catachan's expertise in trap setting and environmental manipulation. Rather than defending the refineries directly, the Mad Dogs allowed certain facilities to be overrun while secretly redirecting the promethium flow patterns. When tyrannid organisms breached what they believed to be critical storage tanks, they instead found themselves channeled into prepared containment zones, where the highly flammable promethium could be weaponized against them. The most devastating implementation of this strategy occurred at Refinery Complex Alpha 9, where tyrannid forces numbering in the thousands breached the outer perimeter. As they penetrated deeper into the facility, motion sensors triggered a sequence of valve operations that flooded specific corridors and chambers with aerosolized promethium. When a critical mass of tyrannid organisms had entered these zones, the Catachans detonated thermic charges that ignited the fuel-air mixture, creating an inferno that consumed nearly 80% of the attacking force in a single moment. The 13th Black Crusade brought unprecedented challenges as chaos forces threatened the Cadian Gate and countless worlds throughout the sector. The Catachan 22nd Regiment, Green Pythons, deployed to the agri-world of Sandalpin when chaos cultist uprisings threatened its vital food production. What initially appeared to be a standard counter-insurgency operation quickly escalated when the Pythons discovered evidence of deeper chaos corruption. Captain Alessio Drake, commanding the regiment's 3rd Company, identified unusual movement patterns among the cultist forces that suggested coordination beyond their apparent capabilities. Rather than engaging these forces directly, Drake initiated a shadow campaign to identify their command structure, using techniques developed for tracking apex predators on Catachan itself. His suspicions proved correct when his scouts located a hidden complex beneath the planet's primary irrigation control center. The facility contained evidence of Word-Bearer's involvement, with Chaos Space Marines directing cultist activities across the entire planet. Rather than calling for reinforcements, which would have alerted the Word-Bearers to their discovery, Drake implemented what he termed Operation Strangler, a methodical campaign to isolate the Chaos Marine leadership from their cultist support network. Over 3 weeks, Catachan teams systematically eliminated cultist cell leaders, while making each death appear to be the result of internal power struggles or accidents. They planted falsified evidence suggesting betrayal and counter-betrayal among the cultist hierarchy, creating an atmosphere of paranoia that paralyzed the organization. Simultaneously, they introduced subtle toxins into the food supply of suspected cultist strongholds, compounds that induced hallucinations and paranoia without obvious symptoms that might reveal external interference. As the cultist organization began to fracture under this psychological pressure, the Word-Bearers emerged from their hidden base to restore order among their mortal followers. This movement exposed them to carefully prepared Catachan ambushes utilizing specialized ammunition developed specifically for engaging Chaos Space Marines. While conventional wisdom holds that standard Imperial Guard units cannot effectively combat Adeptus Astartes, the Green Pythons had prepared extensively for this contingency, employing multi-layered traps that compensated for the transhuman capabilities of their opponents. The most significant engagement occurred at the Delphi Ridge Agricultural Processing Center, where a Word-Bearer's Coryphaus and his honor guard emerged to address gathered cultists. The Catachans had infiltrated the gathering and planted demolition charges at key structural points throughout the facility. As the Chaos Marine began his address, these charges detonated in a precise sequence designed not to kill, but to create a cascading structural collapse that separated the word-bearers from each other and from their cultist audience. As the Chaos Marines found themselves isolated in different sections of the collapsing facility, Catachan kill teams engaged them individually with overwhelming firepower focused on weak points in their armor. The operation eliminated 7 word-bearers, including the Coryphaus, effectively decapitating the Chaos leadership on Sandalpin. Without their transhuman leaders, the cultist uprising lost cohesion and was systematically dismantled by combined Catachan and PDF operations over the following months. Colonel Iron Hand, Straken stands as perhaps the most renowned figure among the Catachan jungle fighters, his legend extending far beyond the dense foliage of his homeworld. Born in the settlement of Snake River, Straken demonstrated exceptional survival instincts even as a child, reportedly killing his first Catachan devil at the age of 14 with nothing but a sharpened stick and a canteen of water. This early display of resourcefulness foreshadowed the tactical ingenuity that would later define his military career. Straken's path to leadership began in the Catachan 2nd Regiment, where he quickly distinguished himself during operations against Orc forces on Breakback Ridge. As a junior officer, he demonstrated an uncanny ability to predict enemy movements based on subtle environmental cues that others overlooked. This talent proved decisive during the Battle of Shatter Valley, where Straken's company successfully ambushed an Orc warband 3 times their number by identifying migration patterns of local avian life that indicated recent greenskin movement. The incident that earned Straken his famous moniker occurred during the Yaquit 27 campaign against Tyrannid splinter forces. While leading a reconnaissance mission deep in Tyrannid-controlled territory, Straken's team discovered a previously unknown Tyrannid bioform, establishing a synaptic relay node. Recognizing the strategic importance of this discovery, Straken ordered his team to withdraw with the intelligence while he remained behind to place demolition charges. As he armed the final explosive, a massive Merle landshark, a creature introduced to Yaquit 27 by the Tyrannids as a bioweapon, burst from the undergrowth and seized his right arm. Rather than attempt to free himself, which would have alerted nearby Tyrannid organisms to his presence, Straken made the calculated decision to sever his own arm using his Catachan fang. Despite catastrophic blood loss, he successfully detonated the charges, destroying the synaptic node and temporarily disrupting Tyrannid coordination across an entire battlefront. He then navigated 15 kilometers of hostile territory back to Imperial lines, fashioning rudimentary medical treatments from local flora to prevent infection. Upon his return to active duty, Straken received extensive bionic augmentation, including the distinctive adamantium arm that completed his transformation into Iron Hand. The augmentation process extended beyond mere replacement of his lost limb. His torso received reinforced ribbing to compensate for internal damage sustained during the Merle attack, while his respiratory system incorporated filtration enhancements that improved his already considerable resistance to airborne toxins. Most significant were the neural interfaces integrated into his bionic arm, allowing precision control that matched and in some ways exceeded the capabilities of his original limb. Unlike many recipients of extensive augmentation, Straken refused the pain suppressors typically included in such systems. He maintained that pain served a vital purpose in combat, providing essential feedback that artificial sensors could not replicate. This philosophy reflects the broader Catachan approach to hardship as a necessary component of effectiveness rather than an impediment to be eliminated. Straken's leadership of the Catachan 2nd Regiment transformed an already elite fighting force into one of the most effective jungle warfare units in Imperial history. His command style emphasizes initiative at all levels, with squad leaders empowered to make tactical decisions based on ground conditions rather than adhering rigidly to predetermined plans. This approach has occasionally created friction with more conventionally minded Imperial commanders, but the results speak for themselves. The Catachan II maintains one of the highest mission success rates of any Astra Militarum regiment. Perhaps Straken's most significant contribution to Imperial military doctrine has been his development of the Predator Protocol for counter-Tyranid operations. This methodology inverts conventional anti-Tyranid tactics by treating Imperial forces as the predator rather than the prey. Instead of establishing defensive perimeters against Tyranid assault, Straken's approach emphasizes continuous movement, targeted elimination of synaptic creatures, and psychological warfare designed to create confusion within the Tyranid hive mind. The effectiveness of this protocol was demonstrated during the defense of Forsar, where the Catachan II faced a Tyranid force estimated at 20 times their number. Rather than attempt to hold fixed positions, Straken divided his regiment into company-sized hunter groups that continuously relocated between prepared positions while targeting Tyranid synapse creatures. By eliminating these coordination nodes in rapid succession, they created cascading failures throughout the Tyranid swarm, reducing their effectiveness despite overwhelming numerical superiority. Straken's most recent campaign on Dulmalin showcased his tactical flexibility when facing Tau forces. Recognizing that the Tau's technological advantages made conventional jungle warfare approaches less effective, he adapted Catachan techniques to the specific vulnerabilities of Tau command structure. His forces targeted the ethereal caste members directing Tau operations, using modified hunting techniques originally developed for tracking scent-sensitive predators on Catachan. By eliminating these leadership figures, while leaving their bodyguards alive to spread uncertainty, Straken created disarray within Tau forces that negated their firepower advantage. While Colonel Straken represents the pinnacle of Catachan leadership, Sergeant Stonetooth Harker stands as the embodiment of Catachan frontline fighting prowess. Born in the notorious region of Catachan known as the Devil's Playground, Harker survived an upbringing in an area where most natives fear to tread. The Devil's Playground hosts a concentration of apex predators so dense that even experienced Catachan hunters operate in groups when traversing the region. Harker, according to regimental records, regularly ventured into this territory alone as a teenager, returning with trophies from creatures that veteran teams considered too dangerous to approach. This background created a fighter of extraordinary physical capability, even by Catachan standards. Standing 2.3 meters tall with musculature that medical cogitators initially registered as augmetic enhancement, Harker can perform physical feats that border on the mythological. During the Caligari campaign, Imperial witnesses reported seeing him lift the front section of a disabled Chimera transport to free trapped guardsmen, a weight that typically requires mechanical assistance to move. Harker's most distinctive feature is his heavy bolter, Payback, a weapon normally mounted on vehicles or operated by weapons teams due to its substantial weight and recoil. Harker carries and fires this massive weapon as a personal arm, using it with a precision that weapons specialists have described as technically impossible. Ballistic cogitators analyzing his combat performance have repeatedly flagged the data as erroneous, as the accuracy he achieves while firing from the hip exceeds what Imperial calculations suggest is possible without stabilization equipment. The weapon itself has been extensively modified under Harker's personal direction. The barrel assembly incorporates heat dispersion technology salvaged from a downed Valkyrie gunship, allowing for sustained fire that would melt standard Imperial barrels. The ammunition feed system has been reconfigured to reduce jamming in humid environments, while the firing mechanism includes a custom-built recoil compensation system that Harker designed based on observations of Catachan fauna that produce high-velocity projectiles. Harker's exploits with Payback have become legendary throughout the Astra Militarum. During the defense of Firebase Zulu on Jumel 4, he held a critical approach against a Chaos Space Marine assault for 17 minutes without support, expending over 8,000 rounds of heavy bolter ammunition. Forensic analysis of the battlefield afterward confirmed 23 Chaos Marine kills, an achievement that would be considered exceptional for an entire platoon, let alone a single guardsman. Beyond his physical prowess and weapon mastery, Harker has demonstrated remarkable tactical acumen that belies his deliberately cultivated image as a simple front-line fighter. His heavy weapons squad operates with a sophistication that reflects careful analysis of battlefield conditions rather than mere application of firepower. During the Vortigern offensive, Harker's squad systematically targeted key structural supports within an enemy-held manufactorum complex, creating a cascading collapse that eliminated an estimated 300 enemy combatants without endangering the facility's valuable plasma reactors. This combination of brute strength and tactical subtlety makes Harker one of the most valuable assets in the Catachan arsenal. He serves as both an inspiration to his fellow fighters and a deterrent to enemies who have heard the stories of the man who carries a heavy bolter as casually as others might carry a lasgun. Imperial propagandists have seized upon his image for recruitment materials, though Harker himself reportedly detests such attention, preferring to let payback do his talking on the battlefield. Perhaps the most enigmatic figure in Catachan lore is Sly Marbo, a warrior whose exploits are so extraordinary that many Imperial historians have questioned whether he represents a single individual or a composite identity assigned to various classified operations. Known variously as the One-Man Army, the Ghost, and the Lone Wolf, Marbo operates almost exclusively in isolation, undertaking missions deemed unsuitable for conventional forces due to either extreme danger or political sensitivity. Marbo's origins remain largely classified, with even his full name subject to speculation. Regimental records indicate he was born in the deep zones of Catachan, regions so dangerous that they remain largely unexplored even by native standards. According to limited available information, his entire family was killed during a particularly vicious devil incursion, leaving the young Marbo as the sole survivor. This traumatic event apparently triggered psychological changes that transformed him from merely exceptional to something beyond conventional human capability. Unlike most Catachan fighters who operate in teams that leverage collective skills, Marbo functions exclusively as a solitary operative. His mission parameters typically involve objectives that conventional military wisdom would consider impossible for a single individual: assassination of heavily guarded targets, destruction of fortified installations, or elimination of entire enemy command structures. More remarkable than the assignment of such missions is his consistent success rate in completing them. Marbo's equipment loadout reflects his unconventional operational methodology. While he carries the standard Catachan Fang, his version is reportedly modified with a monomolecular edge that can penetrate ceramite armor at weak points. His ranged weapon of choice is a custom-built Ripper gun that combines shotgun functionality with selective fire capability, allowing him to switch between close-range saturation and precision targeting as the situation demands. Most distinctive is his reliance on explosive charges of his own manufacture, devices that incorporate both conventional explosives and chemical compounds harvested from various death worlds. The full extent of Marbo's operational history remains sealed under highest-level Adeptus Munitorum classification, but certain missions have entered Imperial lore through eyewitness accounts and fragmentary reports. During the Crandor Rebellion, Imperial forces found themselves stalemated against entrenched heretics in the planet's capital city. After conventional assaults failed with heavy casualties, a single operative, later identified as Marbo, infiltrated the rebel stronghold. 12 hours later, the rebel leadership was found dead in their command bunker, each killed in a different manner that forensic analysis suggested was intended to create maximum psychological impact on discovering forces. More impressive was his intervention during a Genestealer cult uprising on Jericho Reach. When the cult's patriarch established its lair in an abandoned Prometheum refinery, rigged with explosives to destroy any conventional assault force, Marbo reportedly infiltrated the facility through waste discharge pipes considered too toxic for human traversal. Surveillance-picked captures show a single figure moving through the facility, systematically eliminating hybrid guards without raising alarms before reaching the Patriarch's chamber. The subsequent explosion destroyed the facility, while somehow leaving the surrounding hab blocks undamaged, a precision that demolition experts described as technically impossible with available munitions. What makes Marbo particularly valuable to Imperial commanders is his complete psychological detachment from conventional human concerns. He operates without apparent need for recognition, reward, or even basic human interaction. Mission parameters are typically delivered via dead drop rather than direct briefing, and after action debriefings are non-existent. Upon completing an assignment, Marbo simply disappears until the next mission requirement arises, leaving no indication of his whereabouts in the interim. This operational pattern has created significant administrative challenges for the Adeptus Munitorum, which struggles to reconcile his activities with Imperial military protocols. Technically assigned to the Catachan 1st Regiment, Marbo appears in their records as detached for special duties in perpetuity, a designation that allows for his irregular deployment without the administrative oversight that would normally accompany such operations. This arrangement has occasionally created jurisdictional conflicts with other Imperial organizations, particularly the Officio Assassinorum, which has repeatedly expressed concern about a military operative functioning in what they consider their operational domain. Beyond these legendary figures, numerous other Catachan officers have risen to prominence within the broader Astra Militarum hierarchy. Colonel Gator Butcher of the Catachan 18th began his career as a standard jungle fighter before demonstrating exceptional talent for large unit tactics during the Pythos campaign. His ability to coordinate regiment-sized formations while maintaining the infiltration capabilities typically associated with smaller units caught the attention of Lord General Militant Raikin, who appointed Butcher as tactical advisor for jungle warfare operations across 3 subsectors. The distinctive red bandanas worn by Catachan fighters serve as more than mere practical accessories. They represent the first layer in an intricate system of tribal markings that denotes experience, achievements, and lineage. Each Catachan settlement maintains unique patterns of weaving and dyeing these bandanas, with subtle variations in color and texture that identify a fighter's home region to other Catachans. The most prized bandanas incorporate threads harvested from the silk-producing venom spiders of Catachan's equatorial regions, creating a fabric that remains comfortable in extreme humidity while providing remarkable tensile strength. Beyond these universal bandanas, Catachan fighters mark their bodies with elaborate tattoos that chronicle their personal combat histories. Unlike the decorative body art found on many Imperial worlds, Catachan tattoos follow a strict symbolic language that evolved over thousands of years. The placement, color, and design of each marking conveys specific information about the wearer's experiences and capabilities to those versed in reading this physical record. The most fundamental tattoos begin appearing on a Catachan's body during adolescence, with each successful hunting expedition or survival challenge earning a specific mark. A stylized vine pattern encircling the right bicep indicates successful completion of the first solo venture into the deep jungle, typically undertaken at age 12. Small diamond patterns along the forearm represent kills of increasingly dangerous predators, with the specific design indicating the creature's species. A fighter who has successfully killed a full-grown Catachan devil earns the right to tattoo its distinctive serrated pattern across their shoulders, a marking that commands immediate respect even among veteran fighters. Combat experience against various Xeno species earns its own category of markings. Orc teeth rendered in green ink along the knuckles represent confirmed greenskin kills, with veteran orc hunters sometimes running out of space on their hands as their tallies grow. Tyrannid chitin patterns in purple and black across the chest indicate engagements with the Great Devourer, with different hive fleet encounters denoted by subtle variations in the color pattern. Eldar ears tattooed on the neck represent the rare and difficult achievement of outmaneuvering these elusive Xenos in their own favored terrain. The most respected tattoos are those earned through survival rather than killing. A fighter who has endured exposure to Catachan brain leaf spores and survived bears a distinctive spiral pattern at the base of the skull. those who have recovered from the venom of a Catachan viper display a serpentine line that traces the path the poison took through their bloodstream before their natural resistance overcame it. These survival markings carry particular weight in Catachan culture, as they demonstrate the individual's embodiment of the death world's harshest lesson: endurance transcends strength. Veteran sergeants like Harker often display so many overlapping tattoos that their original skin tone is barely visible beneath the accumulated record of their experiences. The density of these markings serves as an immediate visual indicator of experience level, with the most decorated veterans commanding automatic respect from even unfamiliar Catachan units. Imperial commanders who have worked extensively with Catachan forces learn to assess unit capability by observing tattoo patterns rather than relying on formal rank structure. Beyond visual markings, Catachans modify their equipment in ways that reflect both practical needs and cultural identity. The practice of notching knife handles to record significant kills extends beyond mere tallying. The specific pattern of these notches indicates the circumstances of each engagement. A diagonal notch represents a kill made during daylight, while a horizontal mark indicates a night operation. Deeper cuts signify kills made under particularly challenging circumstances, such as while wounded or outnumbered. A knife with no notches immediately identifies its carrier as either inexperienced or, more ominously, so lethal that they no longer feel the need to record their accomplishments. The spiritual beliefs of Catachan fighters represent a fascinating synthesis of Imperial Creed teachings and indigenous survival philosophies developed over millennia of existence on their death world. Unlike many Imperial citizens who view the Emperor primarily as a divine figure, Catachans conceptualize him as the ultimate survivor, a being who endured trials beyond comprehension and emerged stronger for the experience. This perspective frames faith not as passive worship, but as active emulation through embracing hardship as the path to growth. Catachan Imperial priests, known locally as survival preachers, differ markedly from their counterparts on other worlds. These individuals earn their positions not through scholarly study of Imperial texts, but through demonstrated survival capabilities combined with knowledge of Imperial doctrine. A typical survival preacher might deliver sermons while leading hunting expeditions, interpreting the Emperor's teachings through the lens of immediate survival challenges. This practical approach to spirituality resonates deeply with Catachan fighters, who respond more readily to demonstrated capability than to abstract theological concepts. The concept of the Emperor's protection takes on distinctive meaning in Catachan culture. Rather than viewing divine intervention as something granted through prayer and devotion, Catachans believe the Emperor rewards vigilance and self-reliance. A common Catachan proverb states, "The Emperor protects those who protect themselves," reflecting their belief that spiritual favor flows to those who embody the survival mindset. This perspective creates occasional tension with more orthodox Imperial priests, who sometimes view the Catachan interpretation as bordering on heretical self-reliance rather than proper devotion. Particularly significant in Catachan spiritual practice is the Rite of the Fallen Tree, a ceremony conducted when a veteran fighter dies. Rather than the elaborate funerary customs found on many Imperial worlds, this ritual focuses on practical continuation of the deceased's legacy. The fallen fighter's weapons and equipment are disassembled, with components distributed among squad members according to need and merit. This practice ensures that effective tools remain in circulation, while symbolically distributing the departed's strength among their comrades. During this distribution, participants share specific survival knowledge they gained from the deceased, ensuring that critical information persists beyond any individual's lifespan. The ritual concludes with the planting of a native Catachan ironbark seedling, a tree species renowned for its resilience, in a location chosen to maximize its chances of survival. This living memorial represents the Catachan belief that true immortality comes through contributing to the continued survival of others rather than through monuments or recorded accolades. Naming traditions among Catachans reflect both their practical outlook and the harsh reality of their homeworld. Full names typically consist of three elements: a personal name given at birth, a descriptive middle name earned through some significant achievement or characteristic, and a family name that connects the individual to their lineage. The middle descriptive name remains fluid throughout early life, changing as the individual's defining characteristics evolve, before becoming fixed upon reaching adulthood. The birth name is deliberately kept simple and practical, typically consisting of 1 or 2 syllables that can be called clearly through dense jungle or over the sound of combat. Common examples include Drake, Jax, Kara, and Zane, names chosen for their clarity rather than aesthetic appeal. Parents typically select these names based on how effectively they carry through different environmental conditions, sometimes testing potential choices by calling them through dense vegetation before finalizing their decision. The descriptive middle name emerges through consensus rather than formal assignment. As young Catachans demonstrate particular skills or survive notable encounters, their community begins associating them with these achievements. A child who displays exceptional stealth might become known as Shadow, while one who survives a venomous bite might earn the name Venom. These descriptors serve practical purposes, immediately communicating a fighter's special capabilities to unfamiliar comrades during joint operations. Family names carry significant weight in Catachan society, with certain lineages known for producing fighters with specific aptitudes. The Stransky family consistently produces exceptional snipers, while the Harker line is renowned for physical strength beyond even Catachan norms. These family reputations create both opportunities and challenges for descendants, who benefit from the respect accorded to their lineage while facing heightened expectations to uphold family traditions. The naming process culminates in the name-sealing ceremony, typically conducted when a Catachan reaches their 18th year. During this ritual, the community formally acknowledges the individual's descriptive name, which thereafter becomes a fixed part of their identity. The ceremony involves the creation of a personalized version of the Catachan Fang, with the fighter's full name engraved on the blade, using a script developed to resist corrosion in the planet's humid atmosphere. This knife serves as both practical tool and identity marker, with many Catachans considering it their most valued possession. Rites of passage punctuate a Catachan's development from childhood through veteran status, each designed to test and acknowledge growing capabilities. The first significant milestone, the Green Walk, occurs around age 10, when children must navigate a predetermined jungle path alone for the first time. The route, typically spanning 5 to 8 kilometers, incorporates various terrain types and known hazards that must be identified and avoided. Success in this trial earns the child their first Catachan Fang, albeit a smaller version proportioned for their size. The most demanding rite of passage, the Devil's Trial, typically occurs between ages 16 and 18, depending on individual development. This challenge requires the young Catachan to track, hunt, and harvest a specific component from one of the planet's apex predators. The target varies according to regional availability, but must represent a genuine threat capable of killing the initiate if approached carelessly. The trial emphasizes not just combat capability, but judgment, knowing when to engage and when to withdraw based on environmental conditions and the target's behavior. What distinguishes these rites from similar practices on other worlds is their practical focus. Successful completion doesn't merely confer social status, but demonstrates actual survival capability relevant to both civilian life on Catachan and military service in the Astra Militarum. Imperial recruiters have noted that a Catachan who has completed their traditional rites of passage typically demonstrates combat readiness equivalent to that of other guardsmen after 6 months of intensive training. The commemoration of fallen comrades follows distinctive patterns that reflect Catachan pragmatism while honoring their sacrifice. Unlike the elaborate monuments found on many Imperial worlds, Catachan memorials emphasize utility and continuation. When a fighter falls in combat, their squad typically collects a small personal item, often a knife, ammunition pouch, or identification tag, which is then incorporated into the equipment of surviving squad members. This practice, known as carrying the weight, ensures that something of the fallen physically remains in the fight. A veteran Catachan fighter might carry components from dozens of fallen comrades integrated into their gear. a knife handle rewrapped with the bandana of a dead squad mate, ammunition pouches reinforced with material from a fallen sergeant's gear, or bootlaces replaced with those from a comrade who no longer needs them. This practical memorialization creates a tangible connection between the living and the dead while ensuring that useful materials remain in service. More formal commemoration occurs when Catachan units return to their homeworld. Each settlement maintains a survivor's grove, a carefully tended stand of ironbark trees where the names of the fallen are carved into living wood. Unlike stone monuments that remain static, these memorial trees continue growing, with the carved names expanding and changing over time, just as the memory of the fallen evolves in the minds of those who knew them. Families visit these groves not to mourn, but to observe how their relatives' names have been integrated into the living forest, a visual representation of how their sacrifice contributes to ongoing survival. Inter-regimental rivalries among Catachan units manifest differently than those found in other Imperial Guard formations. While regiments like the Mordian Iron Guard or Vestroyan Firstborn compete over parade ground precision or battlefield honors, Catachan competition centers on practical survival skills and adaptability to different combat environments. The Catachan 2nd and 18th Regiments maintain a particularly intense rivalry focused on infiltration capabilities, with each unit constantly developing new techniques to bypass defenses the other establishes. These rivalries serve practical purposes beyond mere tradition, driving continuous improvement in specialized capabilities. During joint deployments, rival Catachan regiments often engage in unauthorized challenge operations, where teams compete to accomplish objectives like infiltrating each other's command posts or retrieving designated items from secured locations. While technically violations of Imperial military protocol, these activities sharpen skills directly relevant to combat operations and are generally tolerated by commanders familiar with Catachan culture. The fierce pride Catachans take in their Death World Heritage manifests most visibly in their interactions with other Imperial forces. When deployed alongside regiments from more hospitable worlds, Catachans deliberately emphasize the harshness of their homeworld through both behavior and appearance. They routinely reject environmental protection equipment considered essential by other units, demonstrating their physiological adaptations by operating comfortably in conditions that would incapacitate standard humans. This pride sometimes creates friction with commissars and other Imperial authorities who mistake Catachan's self-reliance for insubordination. Experienced officers learn to recognize that what appears to be disregard for protocol often represents alternative methods developed through generations of survival experience. The most successful joint operations occur when commanders leverage Catachan pride rather than attempting to suppress it, challenging them to demonstrate their vaunted capabilities through mission accomplishment rather than forcing compliance with standardized procedures ill-suited to their specialized skills. The relationship between Catachan jungle fighters and Imperial commissars has long been characterized by tension, mistrust, and occasionally outright hostility. Unlike regiments from more compliant worlds, Catachans view the political officers assigned to their units with deep suspicion, seeing them as outsiders who lack the survival mindset necessary for effective combat operations. This perspective stems from the fundamental Catachan belief that authority must be earned through demonstrated capability rather than conferred through institutional appointment. Newly assigned commissars to Catachan regiments face what veterans of the commissariat darkly refer to as the survival curve, a period of approximately 3 months during which their fate is essentially determined. Those who attempt to impose discipline through traditional means of summary execution and harsh punishment typically suffer unfortunate accidents during combat operations. These incidents, officially recorded as combat casualties, occur with such statistical regularity that the Officio Prefectus has compiled extensive documentation on the phenomenon. Commissar Tarn Draki's experience with the Catachan 8th exemplifies this dynamic. Upon his assignment, Draki's immediately executed a sergeant for insubordination, when the veteran questioned an order to advance across open ground that showed signs of predator activity. The following day, Drakes was found dead in his quarters, apparently the victim of a venomous insect that had somehow bypassed the environmental seals of his personal quarters. Investigation revealed the puncture wound matched no known indigenous venomous species, but rather corresponded exactly to the dimensions of a Catachan fang. By contrast, commissars who adapt to Catachan operational methods often find themselves integrated into the regiment's structure in ways that differ markedly from standard Imperial practice. Commissar Anton Jebet, assigned to the Catachan 23rd, survived his initial months by demonstrating practical fieldcraft and acknowledging the expertise of veteran fighters. Rather than enforcing discipline through fear, Jebet focused on coordinating between Catachan units and other Imperial forces, serving as a translator of sorts between different military cultures. This adaptive approach transformed Jebet's role from enforcer to facilitator. During the Tyrok Fields campaign, he successfully mediated between Catachan reconnaissance teams and Mordian Iron Guard heavy weapons units, creating a combined arms approach that leveraged the strengths of both regiments. When a Mordian captain questioned the reliability of Catachan intelligence reports, Jebet personally accompanied a patrol into contested territory, validating their findings while demonstrating his willingness to share the same risks as the fighters he supervised. The most successful commissars assigned to Catachan units are those who recognize that effective discipline emerges naturally from the Death World culture rather than requiring external enforcement. Catachans who endanger their comrades through recklessness or fail to maintain their equipment face consequences from within their own ranks far more severe than anything a commissar might impose. This internal regulation, while invisible to outsiders unfamiliar with Catachan social dynamics, maintains unit cohesion more effectively than formal disciplinary structures. Commissar Raylan Van's unorthodox approach with the Catachan 5th demonstrates this principle in practice. Upon assignment, Van spent his first month simply observing the regiment's operations without attempting to assert authority. He identified the informal leadership networks that operated beneath the official command structure and recognized their effectiveness in maintaining discipline. Rather than disrupting these networks, he integrated himself by providing resources and removing administrative obstacles that hindered their function. This approach culminated during operations on Dravaris, where Van's understanding of both Catachan methods and broader Imperial protocols proved invaluable. When administratum officials attempted to court-martial a Catachan captain for requisitioning supplies outside proper channels, Van intervened by reframing the action as an approved commissarial emergency provision. This protection of Catachan operational autonomy, while maintaining technical compliance with Imperial regulations, earned him unprecedented acceptance within the regiment. The Adeptus Munitorum has attempted numerous times to standardize the commissarial approach to Catachan regiments, with consistently poor results. Training programs designed to prepare commissars for assignment to Death World regiments typically emphasize theoretical understanding of survival psychology rather than practical fieldcraft. This academic approach fails to address the fundamental reality that Catachans respect demonstrated capability above all else. The Officio Prefectus now maintains a specialized cadre of commissars with proven success in Catachan units, deploying them as mentors for new assignees. These veterans emphasize that effective commissarial authority with Catachans requires abandoning many traditional methods in favor of approaches that align with Death World values. The most important lesson they impart is that a commissar who attempts to lead from behind will quickly find themselves alone, while one who demonstrates willingness to face the same dangers as their troops may find unexpected allies. The relationship between Catachan regiments and the Adeptus Mechanicus presents a different set of challenges, centered primarily around the Death Worlder's pragmatic approach to equipment modification. Where the Mechanicus views Imperial technology as sacred manifestations of machine god wisdom, Catachans see their wargear as tools to be adapted to immediate tactical requirements without concern for doctrinal purity. This fundamental philosophical difference creates constant friction between Catachan quartermasters and Mechanicus tech priests assigned to support their operations. The Catachan practice of field-modifying lasguns to increase power output at the expense of power cell efficiency particularly offends Mechanicus sensibilities. From the Catachan perspective, a weapon that delivers killing power when needed is preferable to one that maintains technical compliance but fails in combat application. Magos Dominus Farron Vex's experience with the Catachan 19th illustrates this tension. When inspecting the regiment's equipment prior to deployment against Tyrannid forces on Harvester's End, Vex discovered that nearly 80% of their weapons and vehicles had undergone unauthorized modifications. Rather than demanding restoration to standard patterns, Vex took the unprecedented step of documenting these alterations in detail, analyzing their practical effects on performance. The resulting data revealed that while many modifications reduced mechanical reliability under laboratory conditions, they significantly improved performance in the high-humidity, organic-rich environments where Catachans typically operated. Modifications to power cell housing that violated Mechanicus doctrine regarding sacred geometry nonetheless prevented the power drain commonly experienced in jungle conditions. Similarly, alterations to vehicle intake systems that deviated from standard patterns demonstrably improved performance when processing air laden with organic particulates. Vex's findings led to the establishment of the Adaptive Technology Assessment Protocol, a limited framework within which Catachan regiments could document and justify field modifications without triggering automatic censure from Mechanicus authorities. While falling short of full endorsement, this protocol created a mechanism for evaluating modifications based on operational outcomes rather than doctrinal compliance alone. This pragmatic accommodation has spread beyond Catachan units to influence Mechanicus interactions with other specialized regiments. The Talorn Desert Raiders, facing similar challenges with standard equipment in their extreme environment, have successfully cited the Catachan precedent when defending their own modifications to Imperial technology. This gradual shift represents a rare example of Death World practicality influencing broader Mechanicus policy, though tech priests are careful to frame such accommodations as environmental adaptation protocols rather than endorsement of innovation. The most productive collaborations between Catachans and the Mechanicus occur when both parties focus on their shared objective of enhancing combat effectiveness. Magos Biologists Thernvos developed a specialized relationship with the Catachan 7th Regiment after recognizing the value of their empirical knowledge regarding toxic environments. Rather than dismissing their observations as unscientific, Voss incorporated Catachan field reports into his research on biological warfare countermeasures. This collaboration produced the Catachan Pattern Toxin Filter, a modification to standard rebreather equipment that incorporates biological components harvested from Catachan flora. These components, which naturally evolved to process the Death World's toxic atmosphere, proved more effective than standard mechanical filters when dealing with certain biological warfare agents. The Mechanicus classified this development as adaptive utilization of existing biological structures, rather than technological innovation, a semantic distinction that allowed them to maintain doctrinal purity while benefiting from Catachan expertise. The coordination between Catachan regiments and other Astra Militarum forces presents complex challenges that extend beyond equipment considerations to fundamental differences in tactical doctrine and organizational culture. Where regiments like the Mordian Iron Guard or Armageddon Steel Legion emphasize rigid formations and standardized tactical responses, Catachans operate with a fluidity that can appear as disorganization to outside observers. These differences become particularly apparent during joint operations, where command structures designed for conventional military units struggle to effectively direct Catachan forces. The standard Imperial Guard command protocol, with its emphasis on clear chains of authority and predetermined response patterns, conflicts with the Catachan approach of distributed decision-making based on immediate tactical conditions. Colonel Maxim Varon of the Mordian 84th experienced this challenge firsthand during combined operations on Dravis 4. When tasked with coordinating a multi-regiment assault against entrenched Chaos forces, Varon developed an operation plan with precisely timed phase lines and synchronized unit movements. The Catachan contingent, rather than following this plan directly, interpreted it as a general framework within which they operated according to their own tactical judgment. This approach initially created significant friction, with Mordian officers reporting Catachan units as non-compliant and tactically undisciplined. The operation's trajectory changed dramatically when Chaos forces deployed previously undetected heavy weapons that rendered the original plan unworkable. While conventional regiments awaited revised orders, Catachan units immediately adapted to the new tactical reality, exploiting gaps in enemy coverage created by their weapons repositioning. The after-action assessment revealed that this adaptability, initially perceived as indiscipline, had prevented a potential disaster. By adjusting to changing battlefield conditions without waiting for formal order revisions, the Catachan forces maintained offensive pressure that prevented the Chaos forces from establishing a coherent defensive line. This outcome led to the development of what Imperial tacticians now refer to as structured flexibility protocols for joint operations involving Death World regiments. These protocols establish primary objectives and coordination mechanisms while deliberately avoiding micromanagement of tactical implementation. Command staff focus on ensuring that all units understand the operation's strategic goals and maintain awareness of friendly force positions, while allowing specialized regiments to employ their distinctive tactical approaches within this framework. The implementation of these protocols has led to more effective integration of Catachan units into larger Imperial operations. During the Tyrok Fields campaign, Catachan reconnaissance elements operated ahead of Cadian shock troops, identifying enemy vulnerabilities while maintaining constant communication regarding their movements. Rather than following predetermined patrol routes, they adapted their reconnaissance pattern based on battlefield developments, providing Cadian commanders with continuously updated intelligence that enhanced the effectiveness of their more conventional assault tactics. This evolution in joint operations doctrine represents a rare example of mainstream Imperial military thinking, adapting to accommodate specialized approaches rather than forcing conformity to standardized methods. The success of these adaptations has led some progressive elements within the Adeptus Munitorum to examine other areas where rigid standardization might be counterproductive when dealing with regiments from extreme environments. The reputation of Catachan jungle fighters among other Imperial forces varies dramatically depending on the nature of their interactions. Space Marine chapters with extensive experience in jungle warfare, such as the Raptors or Salamanders, typically hold Catachans in high regard, recognizing their exceptional capabilities in environments where even transhuman warriors face significant challenges. Captain Agaton of the Salamander's 3rd Company developed particular respect for Catachan fighters during joint operations against Orc forces on Helatine. When dense jungle terrain neutralized many Adeptus Astartes' advantages in mobility and firepower, Catachan scouts proved invaluable in identifying navigable routes and enemy concentrations. Agaton later incorporated several Catachan movement techniques into his company's training regimen, acknowledging that even Space Marines could learn from the Death Worlders' specialized expertise. This professional respect occasionally extends to cultural exchange, with some Space Marine chapters adopting elements of Catachan practice that complement their own combat doctrines. The Raptors chapter, known for their emphasis on stealth and precision strikes, has incorporated Catachan camouflage techniques into their scout training. During the Badab War, Raptors scouts employed distinctively Catachan-influenced methods to infiltrate secessionist strongholds, demonstrating the practical value of these techniques even when applied by transhuman warriors. The Inquisition maintains a more complex relationship with Catachan regiments, viewing them simultaneously as valuable assets and potential security risks. Inquisitors value the Catachan's ability to operate in environments hostile to most human life, often requisitioning small teams for missions requiring both combat prowess and survival expertise. The Death Worlders' natural resistance to many toxins and biological agents makes them particularly useful for operations involving suspected Nurgle contamination or Tyranid infestation. Inquisitor Havelock Blackthorn of the Ordo Xenos regularly employed Catachan specialists during investigations of potential genestealer cult activity. Their ability to detect subtle environmental disturbances proved invaluable in identifying hidden cult infrastructure, while their experience fighting Tyranid organisms translated effectively to engagement with hybrid cultists. Blackthorn noted in his field journals that Catachans demonstrated an intuitive understanding of Xenos' behavioral patterns that complemented the Ordo's more analytical approach. This operational value is balanced against institutional concerns regarding Catachan independence and resistance to authority. The Ordo Hereticus, in particular, maintains enhanced surveillance of Catachan regiments, concerned that their self-reliance and tendency to question orders might indicate vulnerability to corruption. These concerns are generally considered overblown by those with direct experience working with Death World regiments, who recognize that Catachan pragmatism represents adaptation to extreme conditions rather than ideological deviation. The most productive relationships between Catachans and Imperial institutions develop when both parties recognize and respect their different perspectives while focusing on shared objectives. Commissar Albrecht Harkin's approach with the Catachan 12th exemplifies this balance. Rather than attempting to force compliance with standard Imperial Guard protocols, Harkin focused on ensuring the regiment's specialized capabilities were effectively communicated to higher command, preventing misunderstandings that might lead to inappropriate tactical deployments. During the Vortigern campaign, Harkin successfully advocated for the Catachan 12th to be assigned reconnaissance duties in dense forest terrain rather than participating in the main assault across open ground. This deployment leveraged their specialized skills while avoiding misuse of their capabilities. When questioned by other commissars about his permissive approach to regimental discipline, Harkin responded that effective commissarial leadership required recognizing when standard protocols hindered rather than enhanced combat effectiveness. The Tyranid menace looms as perhaps the most significant existential threat to Catachan in the 41st millennium. Unlike many Imperial worlds facing potential Xenos invasion, Catachan's situation is uniquely precarious due to its location in the Segmentum Ultima, directly in the path of Hive Fleet Leviathan's inexorable advance. Astropathic communications from monitoring stations throughout the sector have tracked the Hive Fleet's movements with growing alarm, as multiple worlds within 3 subsectors of Catachan have already fallen to the Great Devourer. The Adeptus Munitorum strategic assessment classifies the threat level as Extremis Alpha, their highest designation for worlds facing imminent Xenos assault. This classification stems not merely from proximity, but from the particular interest Tyranid scout organisms have shown in Catachan's biosphere. Lictor specimens captured on neighboring worlds have displayed genetic markers suggesting specialized adaptation for Catachan's environmental conditions, indicating that the hive mind has already begun preparing specialized bioforms for the eventual invasion. What makes the Tyranid threat to Catachan uniquely concerning is the world's extraordinary biodiversity and biomass density. Imperial xenobiologists estimate that Catachan contains more organic material per cubic kilometer than any other death world in the Imperium, representing a feast of unprecedented proportions for the Tyranid swarm. Magos Biologies Hirnvoss of the Adeptus Mechanicus has calculated that successful consumption of Catachan would provide enough biomass to increase Hive Fleet Leviathan's size by approximately 8.7%, a substantial gain that would significantly enhance its threat to surrounding systems. More alarming than the raw biomass potential is the genetic treasure trove Catachan represents. The planet's hyper-evolved predator species possess biological adaptations that the tyrannid hive mind would undoubtedly incorporate into new bioforms. The venom of the Catachan devil, capable of dissolving ceramite armor, would provide templates for enhanced bioacid attacks. The camouflage capabilities of the shambling maw could be incorporated into lictor strains, while the hyper-aggressive regenerative properties of the spiker would make tyrannid organisms even more difficult to kill permanently. Initial tyrannid infiltration attempts have already been documented on Catachan, though they have thus far been contained. 3 separate lictor incursions have been identified and eliminated in the past decade, each more adapted to Catachan's environment than the last. The most recent specimen, neutralized by Catachan Devil Squad Vengeance in the northern Widowmaker Mountains, displayed partial resistance to native toxins that had proven fatal to earlier infiltrators, demonstrating the hive mind's iterative adaptation process. The planetary defense strategy against potential tyrannid invasion has required significant modification from standard Imperial protocols. Traditional defensive measures like orbital bombardment and scorched earth tactics would prove counterproductive on Catachan, where the planetary ecosystem itself represents a formidable weapon against tyrannid adaptation. Instead, the Catachan Regiment has been permanently stationed on World, supplementing the PDF with specialized anti-tyrannid expertise gained during the Crag campaign. Colonel Straken, during a rare return to his homeworld, personally oversaw the establishment of monitoring stations throughout Catachan's equatorial regions, creating an early warning network designed to detect the subtle environmental changes that precede tyrannid infiltration. These stations monitor factors including spore content in the atmosphere, migration patterns of native fauna, and unexplained vegetation die-offs that might indicate tyrannid mycetic spores making planetfall. The most innovative aspect of Catachan's tyrannid defense plan involves weaponizing the planet's own ecosystem against the invaders. Magos biologist Thernvas has worked with native hunters to identify and cultivate particularly aggressive plant species that target non-native organisms. The brain leaf colonies, while dangerous to humans, have demonstrated remarkable hostility toward introduced tyrannid tissue samples, attacking them with significantly greater aggression than they display toward native life forms. Strategic expansion of these colonies near likely landing zones creates natural buffer zones that would impede initial tyrannid expansion. While the tyrannid threat represents an external invasion, the Orc menace manifests differently on Catachan. Rather than seeking to consume the world's resources, Orc warbands increasingly target Catachan as a testing ground for their warriors, drawn by the Death World's fearsome reputation. Intercepted Orc communications, crude pictographs and trophies exchanged between warbands indicate that successfully hunting on Catachan has become a status symbol among Orc knobs seeking to prove their prowess. This phenomenon began approximately 50 years ago when the notorious Orc warboss Grimtooth, Deadeye, led a small force of his best commandos to Catachan on what he termed a proper hunt. Although the entire warband was eventually eliminated by a combination of Catachan fighters and native predators, one of Grimtooth's lieutenants escaped with trophies and tales of the challenging hunt. Since then, at least 17 documented Orc landing parties have attempted similar hunting expeditions on Catachan, each drawn by the promise of worthy opponents and deadly prey. Unlike typical Orc invasions focused on conquest, these hunting parties employ uncharacteristically subtle tactics, attempting to match the Catachans at their own game of stealth and ambush. This behavior represents a significant deviation from standard Orc psychology, suggesting that Catachan's reputation has created a unique cultural fixation among certain Orc tribes. Ordo Xeno's analysts have noted with concern that each successive Orc hunting party displays more sophisticated tactics than the last, indicating a dangerous evolutionary pressure driving the Greenskins toward more effective jungle warfare capabilities. The most recent and concerning Orc incursion occurred when the commando specialist known as Snickrot led a force of his Red Skull commandos to Catachan's southern hemisphere. Unlike previous Orc hunters who were quickly eliminated, Snickrot's force remained operational for nearly 3 months, accumulating an alarming collection of human and native predator trophies before they were finally cornered and eliminated by a combined force from 3 different Catachan settlements. Examination of the orc bodies revealed sophisticated camouflage techniques and equipment modifications clearly inspired by Catachan methods, suggesting a dangerous level of adaptive learning. The Planetary Defense Force has responded to this evolving threat by establishing dedicated anti-orc hunter teams, composed of veterans with extensive experience fighting greenskins on other worlds. These teams employ distinctive tactics designed to exploit the psychological weaknesses of orc hunters, deliberately leaving false trails and setting up apparent vulnerable targets that actually laid into carefully prepared kill zones. The effectiveness of these countermeasures has improved with experience, with the most recent orc hunting parties being eliminated within days of landing, rather than the weeks required in earlier encounters. Chaos influence represents a more insidious threat to Catachan than either Tyrannid or orc incursions. The Death World's isolation and extreme environment have historically provided some natural protection against chaos corruption, as the constant struggle for survival leaves little room for the indulgence and excess that often precede falling to the ruinous powers. However, this same environment creates potential vulnerabilities that chaos forces have increasingly attempted to exploit. The foremost chaos threat comes from the Death Guard, whose focus on resilience, endurance, and survival through transformation aligns disturbingly well with aspects of Catachan culture. Plague Marines have made several documented attempts to establish footholds on the Death World, each time focusing their corruption efforts on isolated settlements where their gradual transformations might go unnoticed until too late. Their twisted logic, recovered from intercepted communications, suggests they view Catachans as worthy vessels, whose natural resilience would make them exceptional hosts for Nurgle's gifts. The most significant such incursion occurred in the settlement of Black Viper Ridge 5 years ago. A wounded explorer, actually a cultist deliberately infected with a specialized strain of Nurgle's rot, infiltrated the settlement seeking medical assistance. The disease was engineered to remain dormant for weeks while spreading through water supplies, designed to corrupt rather than kill its hosts. By the time symptoms became visible, nearly 30% of the settlement's population had been infected. What the Death Guard had not accounted for was the Catachan's heightened awareness of biological abnormalities. Settlement medics identified unusual properties in the disease weeks before full symptoms manifested, immediately implementing containment protocols and alerting neighboring communities. The infected were quarantined, and when conventional treatments proved ineffective, the settlement made the harsh but necessary decision to cleanse the infection through controlled burning of the affected quarter. Imperial authorities later determined that without this decisive action, the infection would have spread to neighboring settlements and potentially compromised the entire region. Following this incident, all Catachan settlements implemented enhanced biological screening protocols for visitors and returning hunting parties. These measures include mandatory quarantine periods and specialized testing for warp-influenced biological contamination. Additionally, the Catachan 14th Regiment, specialists in chemical and biological warfare, established a permanent training facility focused on identifying and containing Nurgle corruption, providing regular instruction to settlement defense forces across the planet. Slaanesh cultists have made fewer inroads on Catachan, finding little purchase in a culture that values practical survival skills over pleasure or excess. However, they have attempted more subtle corruption by targeting the pride Catachans take in their abilities. In several documented cases, Slaaneshi agents have infiltrated Catachan settlements posing as off-world traders seeking guides for expeditions. These agents then attempt to manipulate their guides by challenging them to increasingly dangerous feats, pushing them toward excess in the pursuit of proving their capabilities. These corruption attempts have largely failed due to the pragmatic nature of Catachan culture, where survival always takes precedence over showing off. The few individuals who have fallen to such manipulation were quickly identified by their communities when they began taking unnecessary risks that endangered others. Catachan's social structures include informal but effective monitoring systems, where experienced elders watch for behavioral changes that might indicate external influence or psychological instability. The most concerning recent development involves potential Tzeentch interest in Catachan's unique ecosystem. Inquisitorial reports indicate that agents of the Changer of Ways have attempted to obtain samples of various Catachan flora and fauna, particularly species with unusual mutagenic or psychoactive properties. The purpose behind these collection efforts remains unclear, but Ordo Malleus analysts speculate they may be seeking biological templates for new forms of warp-influenced creatures, or attempting to develop specialized biological weapons for use against Imperial forces. In response to these attempts, the Adeptus Arbite's presence on Catachan has been reinforced with specialists in identifying and intercepting biological smuggling operations. Additional monitoring has been implemented at all sanctioned landing fields, with enhanced scanning for unauthorized biological materials leaving the planet. These measures have intercepted several attempted smuggling operations, though authorities remain concerned that some materials may have slipped through before enhanced security was implemented. Beyond these external threats, Catachan faces growing challenges from increased Imperial exploitation of its natural resources. As the demands of the endless wars across the Imperium grow ever more voracious, the unique biological compounds found only on Catachan have become increasingly valuable. This has led to expanded harvesting operations that threaten the delicate balance of the Death World's ecosystem. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintains 17 research stations across Catachan's surface, each focused on harvesting and analyzing different biological compounds. The largest of these, Extraction Facility Epsilon 9, has tripled in size over the past decade as demand for Catachan-derived medical compounds has increased. This expansion has required clearing over 30 square kilometers of jungle, creating an artificial break in the ecosystem that has disrupted local predator territories and plant distribution patterns. These disruptions have had cascading effects throughout the surrounding regions. With their natural territories compromised, apex predator species have migrated into new areas, creating conflicts with both other predators and human settlements. The Catachan devil population around Extraction Facility Epsilon 9 has become particularly problematic, with displaced specimens exhibiting more aggressive behavior and increased willingness to attack fortified positions that they would previously have avoided. Similarly concerning are the ecological impacts of over-harvesting certain plant species. The blood lotus, valued for its regenerative compounds, has been collected so intensively in some regions that its population has declined by over 60% in the past 15 years. As this plant plays a crucial role in binding certain soil toxins, its reduction has led to increased toxicity in groundwater systems, affecting both native species and human settlements that rely on these water sources. The Catachan Planetary Defense Force has raised these concerns with the Adeptus Munitorum, arguing that short-term exploitation threatens the long-term viability of the world's resources and potentially the planet's habitability for human populations. In response, limited conservation measures have been implemented, including designated no-harvest zones and cultivation programs for the most heavily exploited species. However, these measures remain insufficient against the growing Imperial demand for Catachan's biological resources. Adding to these challenges is the increasing frequency of extreme weather events across Catachan's surface. Imperial climatologists have documented a 22% rise in hyper-hurricanes over the past 3 decades, with each storm causing massive disruption to both native ecosystems and human settlements. While some variation is natural in Catachan's volatile climate, the pattern suggests a planetary system under increasing stress from external factors. Analysis by Magos Biologists, Thern Voss has linked these climate changes directly to large-scale harvesting operations, particularly those involving canopy-level flora that help regulate the planet's temperature and moisture cycles. His recommendations for more sustainable harvesting practices have been implemented in some regions, but face resistance from administratum officials focused on meeting immediate production quotas rather than long-term sustainability. The most visible impact of these environmental changes can be seen in settlement patterns across Catachan. Several long-established communities have been forced to relocate in recent years as their surroundings became unviable due to ecological shifts. The settlement of Devil's End, continuously inhabited for over 3 centuries, was abandoned 5 years ago when changes in local water chemistry made agriculture impossible and attracted new predator species to the region. Such relocations place additional strain on Catachan's human population, already struggling with the Death World's inherent challenges. The formation of the Great Rift has fundamentally altered the strategic significance of Catachan within the Imperium's defense architecture. As the immense warp storm tore reality asunder, splitting the galaxy in half, many worlds found themselves isolated and vulnerable. Catachan, however, has experienced a paradoxical enhancement of its importance precisely because of the qualities that make it so deadly. In a galaxy where supply lines are stretched thin and reinforcements may never arrive, the self-sufficiency and adaptability of Catachan regiments have become invaluable assets to Imperial commanders. Prior to the Great Rift's formation, Catachan regiments were typically deployed as specialized units for specific theater operations, particularly in dense jungle environments or death worlds with hostile ecosystems. Their deployment pattern followed a predictable cycle: insertion into challenging environments, completion of objectives unsuited to conventional forces, and extraction once the specialized phase of operations concluded. This operational template changed dramatically after the galaxy was split in two. With the Imperium Nihilus cut off from the light of the Astronomicon and many worlds isolated by warp storms, Catachan regiments increasingly found themselves serving as long-term garrison forces rather than specialized assault units. Their ability to sustain operations with minimal external support and adapt to deteriorating conditions made them ideal for assignments on worlds where resupply might be delayed indefinitely. The Catachan 82nd Regiment demonstrated this adaptability during their 3-year deployment on Herodian 4, after warp storms cut the mining world off from its normal supply routes. Rather than depleting local resources, the Catachans established sustainable hunting patterns and trained the civilian population in survival techniques that allowed the Imperial presence to endure until contact was reestablished. This shift in deployment patterns has strained Catachan's recruitment capacity. Before the Great Rift, the Death World's tithe of soldiers was carefully calculated to maintain sustainable population levels while meeting Imperial requirements. With demand for Catachan regiments increasing by an estimated 47%, according to Adeptus Munitorum records, the planet now sends a greater percentage of its fighting-age population off-world than at any previous point in its Imperial history. Some settlements report that over 70% of their young adults have been conscripted into Imperial service, creating demographic pressures that threaten long-term viability. The Adeptus Administratum has recognized this unsustainable trend and implemented limited measures to address it, including the establishment of accelerated training programs on nearby worlds that incorporate elements of Catachan methods. These programs, while unable to replicate the lifetime of Death World experience that creates true Catachan fighters, have produced auxiliary units with improved survival capabilities for deployment alongside authentic Catachan regiments. The effectiveness of these hybrid units remains significantly below that of true Death Worlders, but they help distribute the burden of increased deployment demands. Primarch Robute Guilliman's return and subsequent implementation of sweeping military reforms has had profound effects on Catachan recruitment and deployment strategies. Unlike many Imperial institutions that resisted the Primarch's changes, Catachan command structures have demonstrated remarkable adaptability in incorporating his tactical innovations while maintaining their distinctive operational methods. Guilliman's review of Catachan performance records led him to an appreciation of their specialized capabilities that many previous Imperial commanders had overlooked. Rather than attempting to standardize their operations to match conventional Astra Militarum doctrine, The Primarch directed the formation of specialized Catachan task forces designed to operate independently in theaters where conventional supply lines couldn't be maintained. These venom groups, typically comprising elements from multiple Catachan regiments combined with limited support assets, have been deployed to critical flashpoints across the Imperium Nihilus, where their self-sufficiency provides a crucial advantage. The most significant of Guilliman's reforms affecting Catachan operations has been the reorganization of command protocols for specialized regiments. Recognizing that Catachan officers possess tactical insights developed through generations of survival experience, the Primarch implemented what he termed operational autonomy parameters that provide Catachan commanders with greater latitude in mission execution than standard Astra Militarum protocols would normally permit. This increased autonomy comes with enhanced accountability measures, including more detailed after-action documentation requirements, but removes many of the bureaucratic constraints that previously hampered Catachan effectiveness. Colonel Drake Marrow of the Catachan 17th demonstrated the value of this increased autonomy during operations on the Hive world Canticulus Prime. When conventional wisdom called for a frontal assault against Genestealer cult positions in the Underhive, Marrow instead implemented a 3-month infiltration campaign that systematically identified and eliminated the cult's leadership without triggering the massive civilian casualties that would have resulted from standard Imperial clearance protocols. His after-action report, presented directly to Guilliman's strategic command, has since been incorporated into Astra Militarum tactical doctrine for urban counterinsurgency operations. The Primarch's reforms have also addressed long-standing tensions between Catachan units and the Commissariat. Rather than forcing conformity to standard discipline protocols ill-suited to Death World fighters, Guilliman established specialized commissarial training for officers assigned to Catachan regiments. This program emphasizes understanding the cultural context of Catachan, behavior patterns, and recognizing when apparent insubordination actually represents tactical adaptability. Commissars who complete this specialized training demonstrate significantly higher survival rates when assigned to Catachan units, while also reporting improved operational coordination. Perhaps most importantly, Guilliman's reorganization of Imperial logistics has included recognition of Catachan's unique recruitment challenges. The new tithe assessments implemented under his authority include sustainability metrics that prevent over-recruitment from death worlds with limited population bases. For Catachan, this has meant a slight reduction in raw numbers of regiments raised, but an increase in support for training and equipment, producing fewer but better equipped units. This approach recognizes that the true value of Catachan regiments lies not in their numbers, but in their specialized capabilities that cannot be easily replaced. The technological challenges presented by the Indomitus Crusade era have necessitated adaptations in Catachan equipment and tactics. As adversaries ranging from resurgent Necron dynasties to evolved Tyranid bioforms deploy increasingly sophisticated weapons against Imperial forces, Catachan fighters have demonstrated their characteristic pragmatism in developing countermeasures. The threat posed by Necron quantum phase technology, which allows enemy forces to bypass conventional physical barriers, has been particularly challenging for defensive operations. Catachan units have responded by developing what they term layered fallback positions, a defensive arrangement where no single perimeter is relied upon for protection. Instead, fighting positions are established in concentric layers with overlapping fields of fire, ensuring that enemies who phase through one defensive line immediately encounter another. This approach, first implemented by the Catachan 23rd during operations against Necron forces on Helios Prime, has since been adopted by other Imperial units facing similar threats. Tyranid adaptation has presented different challenges, as new bioforms demonstrate increasing resistance to conventional Imperial weaponry. Catachan regiments have responded by expanding their already considerable expertise with flame weapons, developing specialized promethium mixtures that burn at temperatures high enough to overcome even the enhanced heat resistance of evolved tyrannid carapaces. The Catachan cocktail, a field-modified incendiary compound incorporating elements harvested from local flora on deployment worlds, has proven particularly effective against tyrannid organisms that evolved resistance to standard promethium formulations. The increased deployment of Drukhari homunculi-created abominations has led to specialized Catachan close combat techniques designed to counter opponents with abnormal physiologies. Traditional targeting of vital organs proves ineffective against such creatures, which often have redundant or relocated biological systems. Catachan fighters have adapted by developing what they term structural combat, focusing attacks on locomotion systems and structural integrity rather than attempting to target organs that may not exist or function as expected. This approach has proven effective not only against Drukhari creations, but also against the increasing variety of chaos-mutated opponents encountered in the wake of the Great Rift's formation. Communication challenges in theaters affected by warp disturbances have led to the revival and refinement of traditional Catachan signaling methods that don't rely on electronic transmission. Complex systems of environmental markers, originally developed for hunting on their death world, have been adapted for battlefield communication. These include patterns of broken vegetation, specific arrangements of stones or debris, and even specialized scent markers created from local materials. While slower than Vox communication, these methods provide reliable information transfer in environments where electronic systems fail due to warp interference or enemy jamming. The most significant technological adaptation has been in response to increased void warfare requirements, as Catachan units find themselves deployed to fleet actions more frequently than in previous eras. Traditional Catachan expertise focused primarily on planetary surface operations, leaving them at a disadvantage in ship-to-ship boarding actions. To address this gap, the Catachan 41st Regiment established a specialized void warfare training program that adapts jungle fighting techniques to the three-dimensional environment of spacecraft interiors. This program emphasizes movement through maintenance ducts and life support systems rather than main corridors, applying the same principles of unexpected approach used in jungle operations to the confined spaces of Imperial vessels. The future prospects for Catachan as a vital source of elite warriors remain both promising and precarious. The Death World's unique environment continues to produce fighters whose capabilities cannot be replicated through conventional training, ensuring ongoing demand for their specialized skills. However, several converging factors threaten the long-term sustainability of this resource. The most immediate concern is the ecological impact of increased Imperial exploitation of Catachan's biological resources. As demand for medical compounds and biological weapons derived from Catachan flora and fauna has increased, harvesting operations have expanded beyond sustainable levels in many regions. The resulting ecological disruption threatens not only the unique species that make these resources valuable, but also the delicate balance that allows human settlement to persist on the Death World. Magos Biologas Thernvas has implemented limited conservation measures in regions under Adeptus Mechanicus control, establishing cultivation facilities for the most heavily harvested species and restricting wild collection to sustainable levels. However, these efforts cover only a fraction of Catachan's surface, with many areas still subject to exploitative harvesting by less scrupulous Imperial organizations. Without comprehensive conservation protocols, the unique biological resources that make Catachan valuable to the Imperium may be depleted within centuries. The demographic pressure of increased recruitment presents a more immediate threat to Catachan's viability as a source of specialized fighters. With a greater percentage of the population being tithed for military service, many settlements struggle to maintain sufficient population for basic survival functions. Some smaller outposts have been abandoned entirely as their numbers fell below viable thresholds, their remaining inhabitants consolidated into larger settlements where collective defense remains possible. Guilliman's reforms have partially addressed this issue by implementing more sustainable recruitment quotas, but the fundamental tension remains between Imperial military needs and Catachan's limited population base. Some within the Adeptus Munitorum have proposed establishing off-world training facilities that would attempt to recreate Catachan conditions for recruits from other worlds, theoretically expanding the production of jungle fighters without further straining the Death World's population. Initial experiments with this approach have yielded fighters with improved capabilities compared to standard guardsmen, but still significantly below the standard of true Catachans raised in the authentic Death World environment. Despite these challenges, Catachan's importance to Imperial defense strategy continues to grow as the threats facing humanity evolve. The adaptive capabilities developed through generations of survival on the Death World have proven remarkably transferable to the increasingly unpredictable battlefields of the 41st millennium. As supply lines stretch thinner and conventional logistical support becomes less reliable, the self-sufficiency of Catachan fighters represents an increasingly valuable asset. The legacy of Catachan extends beyond its regiments to influence broader Imperial military doctrine. Tactical innovations developed by Catachan commanders have been incorporated into Astra Militarum training protocols, particularly those involving operations in hostile environments or with limited support. The Catachan method of adaptive resource utilization has been taught at the Schola Progenium to officer candidates destined for deployment to frontier worlds where conventional supply chains cannot be maintained. Perhaps most significantly, Catachan has come to symbolize humanity's tenacity in the face of overwhelming hostility, a living example that human determination can carve survival from even the most inimical environments. In an era where countless worlds have fallen to enemies both ancient and new, the continued existence of human settlement on Catachan stands as testament to the resilience that may yet preserve the Imperium through its darkest hour. As the light of the astronomican flickers and warp storms isolate worlds across the galaxy, the lessons of Catachan, adaptability, self-reliance, and implacable determination have never been more relevant to humanity's struggle. Whatever threats the future may hold, the Catachan jungle fighters will face them as they have faced all previous challenges, with a grim pragmatism born from generations of survival against impossible odds, secure in the knowledge that they have already conquered the deadliest world in the galaxy.